The gunshot cracked through the desert night like thunder splitting stone. Then another, and another. Each blast echoed across the canyon walls, carrying death on the wind. Elijah pulled his horse to a sudden stop, leather reins cutting into his palms. He'd ridden these trails for 5 years in solitude, 5 years of avoiding trouble, avoiding life itself. But those weren't hunting shots. Those were execution shots, clean, deliberate, final. The September moon hung fat and yellow above the mesa, painting the sagebrush silver and throwing long shadows across the dirt. Elijah's mare Duchess snorted nervously, her ears pinned back. She smelled it too. Blood. Fresh blood mixing with the dusty sweetness of desert sage. He should turn back. Every instinct screamed at him to wheel Duchess around and ride hard for his cabin to maintain the careful isolation he'd built around himself like a fortress. But something in those shots, something in the way they'd punctured the night, pulled at him with invisible hooks. "Easy, girl," he whispered to Duchess, though the words were meant more for himself. His hand moved instinctively to the Colt .45 at his hip fingers, brushing the worn wooden grip. 5 years since he'd drawn it in anger. 5 years since he'd been anything more than a ghost haunting these canyons. The trail curved ahead, winding through a cluster of ancient cottonwoods that grew along the dry creek bed. That's where the shots had come from. Elijah dismounted, his boots hitting the ground soft as cat paws. At 43, his body still moved with the fluid grace of a younger man, though his eyes carried the weight of too many buried memories. He tied Duchess to a scraggly juniper and moved forward on foot, staying in the shadows, each step calculated and silent. The smell of blood grew stronger, mixing now with gunpowder and something else. Fear. The kind of fear that soaks into the air itself when someone knows they're about to die. Through the trees, he saw her. She was young, maybe 22, with dark hair that spilled across the dirt like spilled ink. Her dress, once blue, was now black, with blood spreading from a wound in her side. She was crawling, dragging herself across the ground with her fingernails leaving grooves in the earth. In her right hand, clutched so tight her knuckles had gone white, was an envelope, blood-soaked, torn at one corner. 3 bodies lay scattered behind her, men in dark coats. One still had his gun in his hand, finger frozen on the trigger. Another stared at the moon with eyes that would never blink again. The third was face down, a knife protruding from between his shoulder blades. "Please," the girl whispered, though she couldn't possibly have known Elijah was there. "Please, someone. Anyone." Elijah stepped from the shadows, and her head snapped up. Her eyes were green as river stones, wide with terror and pain, but there was something else there too. Determination, the kind that keeps a person crawling when they should be dead. "Don't," she gasped, trying to raise a small derringer she'd hidden in her dress folds. Her hand shook so badly the gun fell into the dirt. "Don't come closer, they'll kill you too." Elijah knelt beside her, his movements slow and careful, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. "They're dead," he said simply. His voice came out rough, unused. He hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 months. "No." She shook her head frantically. "More coming. Always more coming. They killed him. They killed my father." Her fingers tightened on the envelope. Have to get this to someone who'll listen. "Your father, Mayor Morton." Tears mixed with dirt on her cheeks. "Said he was corrupt. Said he stole from the town. But it was Garrett. Deputy Mayor Garrett, he's the one. He's been stealing for years, and when Papa found out—" Her voice broke into a sob that turned into a cough. Blood touched her lips. Elijah's blood turned to ice. Garrett. The name hit him like a physical blow, sending him reeling back 5 years to another night, another scene of blood and death. His wife Margaret, her body crumpled on their kitchen floor. His son Thomas, only 8 years old, trying to crawl to his mother even as the life drained from him. And Garrett's voice, cold and matter-of-fact. "Should have minded your own business, Sheriff." Garrett. He repeated the name, tasting like ashes in his mouth. The girl's eyes focused on him with surprising clarity. You know him. I knew him. Then you know what he's capable of. She pressed the envelope against his chest, leaving a bloody handprint on his shirt. Names, dates, account numbers, everything. Papa gathered it all. Proof of what Garrett's done, who he's paid off, who he's killed. Why should I care? The question came out harsher than he intended. Because, she said, her voice growing weaker, because someone has to. Because if no one stops him, he'll keep killing, keep destroying, like he destroyed your family. Elijah went rigid. How do you? Papa knew. He knew who you were, Elijah Morrison. He knew what Garrett did to you. He was gathering evidence about that too. It's in there, in the envelope. Her eyes started to flutter closed. Was coming to find you, to give you this. But Garrett found out, sent his men. In the distance, hoofbeats, coming fast. They're coming, she whispered. Leave me, take it and go. Elijah looked at the envelope, at the blood-soaked proof of everything he'd suspected, but could never prove. Then he looked at the girl, at the way she fought to keep breathing, to stay conscious. What's your name? Clara Morton. Well, Clara Morton, Elijah said, scooping her up in his arms, surprised at how light she was, like a bird with broken wings. You're not dying tonight. She made a weak sound of protest. Can't run. We'll slow you down. Then we don't run. He carried her quickly to Duchess, who stamped nervously at the smell of blood. We disappear. The hoof beats were getting closer, 3 riders, maybe 4, by the sound of it. Elijah settled Clara in the saddle, then swung up behind her, one arm around her waist to keep her upright, the other taking the reins. Hold on, he told her. To what? She murmured, her head lolling back against his chest. To hope, he said, and spurred Duchess into the night. Behind them, shouts erupted as the riders found the bodies. Garrett's men, no doubt, coming to clean up loose ends. But Elijah knew these canyons like the lines on his own hands. Every hidden trail, every secret cave, every place where a man could vanish like smoke. As they rode, Clara's blood soaking into his shirt, the envelope pressed between them like a promise of justice, delayed but not denied. Elijah felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Purpose. The moon watched them disappear into the labyrinth of stone and shadow, 2 broken souls carrying the seeds of revolution in a blood-stained envelope racing against death itself into the vast embrace of the desert night. The abandoned mine shaft swallowed them like a throat swallowing secrets. Elijah had discovered it 3 years into his exile, a remnant from the silver rush of '68, when men believed these hills held fortune instead of just scorpions and sorrow. Now it served as sanctuary, 40 feet of tunnel carved into the mountain's belly, ending in a chamber where he'd stashed supplies for emergencies he'd never wanted to imagine. Clara's breathing had gone shallow and rapid, each exhale, a small ghost escaping her lips. Elijah laid her on the bedroll he kept there, working by the light of a single kerosene lamp that threw their shadows huge and wavering against the stone walls. The bullet had gone through her side, which was good, but it had taken meat with it, leaving a hole that wept blood with every heartbeat. "Stay with me," he said, tearing strips from his spare shirt. His hands moved with practiced efficiency muscle memory from a time when he'd been responsible for keeping peace in a town of 3,000 souls. Before Garrett, before everything went to hell. Clara's eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with effort. "You're the ghost sheriff," she whispered. "Papa told stories, said you died with your family." "Part of me did." He pressed the cloth against her wound, and she bit down on a scream. "This is going to hurt." "Already hurts." She managed a weak smile that transformed her face, revealing the girl she must have been before tonight's horror. "Tell me about them, your family. Need something to focus on besides." Elijah's hands stilled for a moment. Nobody had asked him about Margaret and Thomas in 5 years. He'd buried their names along with their bodies, locked the memories in a vault he'd sworn never to open. My wife was named Margaret, he heard himself say as he worked. She had hair the color of wheat in sunshine and a laugh that could make flowers bloom in winter. Came from Boston originally. Her father said she was crazy to marry a lawman in a frontier town, but she said she'd rather have 1 year of adventure than 50 of safety. How long were you married? 12 years. She gave me a son, Thomas. Boy had his mother's smile and my stubbornness. 8 years old when... He trailed off, focusing on wrapping Clara's wound. He wanted to be a sheriff like his father, used to wear my old badge on his shirt, practice his quick draw with a wooden gun I carved for him. Clara's hand found his wrist, her touch light as dust. Garrett took them from you. It wasn't a question. Elijah nodded, not trusting his voice. The memories were flooding back, now breaking through the dam he'd built. Margaret's voice calling him for dinner. Thomas running to meet him when he came home, arms spread wide, yelling, "Papa!" like it was the best word in the world. He was my deputy, Elijah finally said. James Garrett trusted him with my life. More fool me. I'd started noticing discrepancies. Money missing from the town treasury, complaints about protection fees from local businesses. When I confronted him, he laughed, said I was naive, said the whole territorial government was in on it, and I could either take my cut or he'd kill you. I told him I'd have him arrested. That night while I was making rounds, he sent men to my house. His voice went flat, emotionless. I heard the shots from Main Street. By the time I got there, it was over. Margaret was in the kitchen. She'd been making bread. Thomas was in the hallway. He'd tried to get to his mother. Clara's tears were running freely now, cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. I'm so sorry. Garrett was there when I arrived, standing on my porch like he owned it. Should have taken the deal, Elijah, he said. Then he shot me, twice in the chest, left me for dead. Elijah pulled back his shirt, revealing 2 puckered scars just below his ribs. But I didn't die. A traveling doctor found me, kept me alive. By the time I healed, Garrett had already spread the story. Murder-suicide, he called it. Said I'd gone crazy, killed my family, then myself. Had witnesses who swore to it. Probably the same men who pulled the triggers. So you disappeared. What else could I do? No one would believe me over him. He had judges, marshals, even newspapermen in his pocket. Fighting him would have just gotten more innocent people killed. He finished binding Clara's wound and sat back on his heels. So I became what he said I was, a ghost. Clara struggled to sit up, wincing at the movement. But now you have proof. Papa spent 2 years gathering that evidence. He knew Garrett was corrupt, but he needed ironclad documentation, bank records, signed confessions from men Garrett thought were loyal, even a letter where Garrett bragged about killing your family. Elijah picked up the blood-stained envelope, weighing it in his hands. Such a small thing to hold so much power. Your father was a good man. He tried to be. Clara's voice carried complicated emotions. He wasn't perfect. After Mama died when I was 10, he threw himself into politics, said he wanted to make the territory better for me, safer for me. But mostly I think he just didn't know how to be alone with his grief. We lived in the same house, but might as well have been strangers. I'd go weeks without really talking to him, just passing conversations about dinner or the weather. What changed? I did. 6 months ago, I confronted him. Told him I was leaving, going back east to my mother's family. He broke down, actually cried, said he'd failed me as a father, but wanted to make things right. Started including me in his work, teaching me about governance, about justice. That's how I learned about Garrett. Papa didn't want to involve me, but I insisted. I helped him gather some of that evidence. I was the one who found out about you. How? There was an old woman, Mary Templeton. She cleaned your house before it happened. She saw Garrett's men leaving that night. She's been too scared to talk all these years, but she's dying now. Consumption. She wanted to clear her conscience. Her testimony is in that envelope, too. Elijah stood pacing the small chamber. The lamp flame flickered, making the shadows dance like ghosts. Outside, he could hear Duchess nickering softly, probably smelling water in the deeper parts of the mine. "They'll come looking for you," he said. "Garrett won't stop until he knows you're dead, and that evidence is destroyed. Then we have to move fast. There's a federal judge in Tucson. Papa trusted him. Said he was the only clean one left. If we can get to him, you can barely sit up, let alone ride to Tucson. That's 3 days through hard country." Clara's jaw set with surprising stubbornness. "Then I'll learn to ride through pain. My father died for this. Those men back there died protecting me. I won't let their sacrifice mean nothing." Elijah studied her in the lamplight. She was young, yes, but there was steel in her spine, the same kind of steel Margaret had shown when she'd chosen to follow him west, the same kind Thomas might have developed if he'd had the chance to grow up. "There's another problem," he said. "I'm supposed to be dead. The moment I show my face in any town, Garrett will know. He'll mobilize everything he has. Then we don't go to the towns. We go around them. We gather allies first. Papa had friends, people who hate Garrett, but were too afraid to move against him. With this evidence, with you alive to testify, they might find their courage. You're talking about starting a war." Clara's green eyes blazed with fierce determination. "Garrett started the war when he killed your family, when he killed my father. We're just going to finish it." Outside, the wind picked up howling through the canyon like the voices of the dead. Elijah could almost hear them. Margaret, Thomas, and now Mayor Morton, and however many others Garrett had silenced over the years. "There's a ranch," he said slowly, "about 15 miles north. Belongs to a man named Samuel Freeman. He was my friend once. Might still be if he believes I'm not a murderer." "He'll believe," Clara said with surprising confidence. "The truth has a way of making itself known, even when it's been buried for years." Elijah looked at her, this young woman who'd lost everything, but still burned with purpose. She reminded him of himself before the world had beaten him down. Maybe that's what the desert had really given him tonight. Not just evidence or a chance for revenge, but something more precious. A reason to stop being a ghost and start being a man again. "We'll wait until dawn," he said. "You need rest, and Garrett's men won't risk these canyons in the dark. Too easy to ride off a cliff or into a ravine." Clara nodded, then held out her hand. "I haven't properly introduced myself. Clara Marie Morton, temporarily displaced, but not defeated." He took her hand, surprised by the strength in her grip, despite her injury. "Elijah James Morrison, former sheriff, current ghost, future pain in Garrett's ass." She laughed, then immediately regretted it, pressing her hand to her wounded side, but the smile remained. "I think this is the beginning of something, Elijah Morrison. Beginning of what? Justice," she said simply. "And maybe, if we're very lucky, redemption." Lamp flame guttered, casting wild shadows on the cave walls. Outside, coyotes howled their lonely songs to the moon, and in that abandoned mine shaft, 2 broken souls began to forge themselves into something new, something dangerous, something Garrett would never see coming. A partnership born of blood and pain, but aimed at hope. The fever came with the dawn, creeping into Clara's body like poison through her veins. Elijah had expected it, had prepared for it, but watching her thrash and mumble on the bedroll brought back memories he'd tried to bury with whiskey and solitude. "Thomas!" Clara moaned, her eyes rolling back. "No, don't take Thomas." Elijah's blood went cold. She was delirious, pulling names from their conversation, weaving them into her own nightmares. He pressed a cool cloth to her forehead, and her eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused. "Papa, I'm sorry," she gasped. "I should have been there, should have stopped them." "Shh," Elijah soothed, holding her shoulders as she tried to rise. "You're safe. It's just the fever talking." But Clara was somewhere else, lost in a memory that played behind her eyes like a stage show. He came to my room. Papa came to my room that night, 3 weeks ago, said he had to tell me something important. Said if anything happened to him, I should find the ghost sheriff. Elijah stilled, listening. I laughed. Clara continued, tears streaming down her fevered cheeks. Told him ghost stories were for children, but he grabbed my hands, looked me in the eye. He's real, Clara. Elijah Morrison is alive. I've seen proof. If something happens to me, you find him. Give him the envelope in my safe. Tell him about Garrett. Tell him about Sarah. Sarah! Elijah's voice came out strangled. What about Sarah? Clara's eyes focused momentarily, seeing him, but not really seeing him. Your wife's sister. Papa said she's alive. Garrett has her. Uses her as leverage insurance. Keeps her at the old Brennan Ranch. Makes her write letters saying she's traveling. But Papa knew. Papa figured it out. The world tilted. Elijah gripped the cave wall to steady himself. Sarah, Margaret's younger sister who'd come to visit just a month before the murders. She'd left suddenly a telegram saying their aunt in California was sick. He'd never questioned it, too destroyed by grief to think clearly. She saw everything, Clara mumbled, sinking back into delirium. Sarah saw Garrett's men. That's why he couldn't kill her. Too many people knew she was visiting, so he took her instead. 5 years, Elijah. 5 years she's been prisoner. Elijah's hands shook as he re-wet the cloth. Sarah alive. Sarah who had Margaret's eyes, Margaret's smile. Sarah who'd played with Thomas, teaching him card games and telling him stories about Boston. The rage that filled him was cold and sharp as winter ice. Clara's fever, rambling, continued painting a picture of her own past that made Elijah's chest ache. She spoke of lonely dinners in a grand house, of watching other girls with their fathers at town functions, of trying to be perfect enough to earn her father's attention. She talked about her mother's death, how she held her hand as consumption ate her lungs, how her father hadn't come to the bedside until it was too late. He stood in the doorway, Clara whispered, her voice young and broken. Mama was already gone, and he just stood there, like he didn't know how to enter a room that held that much pain. I hated him for that. For years, I hated him. The sun climbed higher, sending fingers of light into the cave entrance. Elijah kept vigilant watch gun loaded and ready, but no riders came. Either Garrett's men had lost the trail, or they were waiting, planning something worse. Around midday, Clara's fever broke. She opened clear eyes, focusing on Elijah's haggard face. How long? 6 hours. You talked. About Sarah. Clara struggled to sit up, wincing. I remember. Papa discovered her by accident. He was investigating property records, found the Brennan Ranch was still paying taxes, but listed as unoccupied. When he sent someone to check, they saw a woman in an upstairs window. Papa recognized her from an old photograph in the newspaper archives from when she'd visited you. I have to get her out. No. Clara grabbed his arm with surprising strength. That's what Garrett wants. The moment you show yourself, he'll kill her. We have to be smart. Papa had a plan. She reached for the envelope still clutched in Elijah's hand. With shaking fingers, she opened it, revealing not just documents, but a detailed map of the Brennan Ranch guard rotations and a letter in her father's careful script. He was going to hire mercenaries, Clara explained. Men from outside the territory who didn't know Garrett couldn't be bought or intimidated. Create a distraction in town while a small group extracted Sarah. Then use her testimony along with the other evidence to bring federal marshals down on Garrett's head. Elijah studied the documents, his tactical mind already working through scenarios. Your father was thorough. He was a politician. He understood that defeating Garrett meant more than just killing him. It meant destroying his entire network, discrediting his allies, making sure another Garrett couldn't just step into his place. But he didn't count on Garrett striking first. Clara's face darkened. No, someone betrayed him, someone he trusted. The only people who knew about the evidence were Papa Me and his personal secretary, Marcus Wells. Wells. Elijah knew the name. A thin, nervous man who'd been Morton's shadow for 10 years. Never liked him. Something about his eyes. Too eager to please. Papa trusted him completely. Said Marcus was like a son to him. Clara's voice turned bitter. The son he never had. The child who actually wanted to be around him. The pain in her voice was raw, and Elijah recognized it. The wound of never being enough for someone you desperately wanted to love you. My boy Thomas. Elijah found himself saying, he wasn't my blood son. Clara looked up surprised. Margaret couldn't have children. We tried for 3 years before accepting it. Then one day I found a baby on the jail steps. No note, no explanation. Just this tiny thing wrapped in a flour sack, crying his lungs out. Margaret took one look at him and said, well, husband, seems God decided we were ready after all. You never found out who his real parents were. Never looked. Didn't matter. The moment Margaret held him, he was ours. Thomas never knew. We were going to tell him when he turned 16. Let him decide if he wanted to find his blood family. Elijah's voice cracked. Never got the chance. Clara reached out, covering his weathered hand with hers. He was yours in every way that mattered. Just like you were your father's daughter, even when he couldn't show it. They sat in silence for a moment, two wounded souls recognizing themselves in each other's pain. Outside, a hawk screamed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. I need to tell you something, Clara said quietly, about that night when Garrett's men came. Elijah waited. I was there when they killed Papa, hidden behind his desk. I watched James Garrett put a gun to my father's head. Papa didn't beg, didn't plead. He just said, Clara knows everything. Even if you kill me, she'll finish this. Garrett laughed, said he'd enjoy hunting me down, said I'd die screaming like my mother did. Clara. My mother didn't die of consumption. She continued, her voice hollow. That's what Papa told everyone what he believed. But I was there. I saw the pillow over her face, saw the man holding it. He had a scar on his hand shaped like a crescent moon. Years later, I saw that same scar on James Garrett's hand when he visited Papa for dinner. The revelation hung between them like a loaded gun. Garrett hadn't just destroyed Elijah's family. He'd been systematically eliminating anyone who might threaten his power for years using murder disguised as tragedy. We're going to stop him, Elijah said, his voice carrying the weight of an oath. For Margaret, for Thomas, for your parents, for Sarah, for everyone he's hurt. Clara nodded, then gasped as pain shot through her side. The wound was seeping again, blood spotting the bandages. You need a real doctor, Elijah said. No doctors. Garrett owns most of them, and the others won't risk helping us. She gritted her teeth. I'll manage. Pain is just weakness leaving the body. Who told you that nonsense? My mother. The real one, not the story everyone believes. She was tough as saddle leather beneath the silk dresses. Had to be, to survive in this territory. Clara's eyes grew distant. She taught me to shoot when I was 12. Papa never knew. We'd sneak out to the desert, and she'd set up bottles on rocks. A woman needs to know how to protect herself, she'd say. The West doesn't forgive weakness. Smart woman. She was. I think she suspected something about Garrett even then. The last real conversation we had, she made me promise to always sleep with a gun under my pillow. Said trust was a luxury a woman couldn't afford. I thought she was paranoid. Now I know she was trying to warn me. The afternoon sun was starting to slant into evening. They needed to move, soon find better shelter, maybe risk contacting Samuel Freeman. But first, Elijah needed to understand the full scope of what they were facing. The evidence your father gathered, he said, gesturing to the envelope. How many others are implicated? 17 men in positions of power. 3 judges, 5 marshals, the territorial tax assessor, 2 bank presidents, and various businessmen. Garrett's been building his network for over a decade. Your investigation 5 years ago was the first real threat to it. So he eliminated me. He tried to, but you survived, and that's been eating at him. Papa's sources said Garrett still has nightmares about you. Wakes up screaming your name sometimes. You're the one that got away, the ghost that haunts him. Good. Let him be afraid. Clara studied him in the fading light. You've changed. When you found me, you were ready to let the world burn. Now you're ready to light the match yourself. You reminded me that some things are worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary, but not worth living for. The question caught him off guard. He'd been so focused on revenge, on justice, that he hadn't thought about what came after, if there was an after. One battle at a time, he said finally. Clara nodded, but her eyes held a sadness that seemed beyond her years. My father used to say that. Never planned past the next election, the next vote. Maybe if he had, if either of you had, things would be different. Before Elijah could respond, Duchess whinnied outside, a warning. He was on his feet instantly, gun drawn, moving to the cave entrance. In the distance, dust rose against the sunset. Riders, at least 6. They found us, he said quietly. Clara forced herself to stand swaying, but determined. Then we make our stand. You can barely walk. I can shoot. Mama taught me well. She pulled the derringer from her dress, checking the chambers. 2 shots. Not much, but better than nothing. Elijah watched the riders approach his mind, calculating angles, distances, possibilities. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and had nowhere to run. But they had something Garrett's men didn't. They had nothing left to lose. Clara, he said, not taking his eyes off the approaching threat. Whatever happens, I want you to know your father would be proud of you. And Margaret and Thomas would be proud of you, she replied, moving to stand beside him. The riders were close enough now to make out details. The man in front wore a sheriff's badge that caught the dying light. But Elijah knew that badge was as false as Garrett's smile. Ready, he asked. Ready, Clara confirmed. And there in the mouth of an abandoned mine, 2 ghosts prepared to rise from the dead and drag James Garrett down to hell with them. The riders stopped just outside rifle range, their silhouettes black against the burning orange sky. The man with the false sheriff's badge raised his hand, and Elijah recognized him. Dale Hutchins. He'd been a drunk and a bully 5 years ago. Now he wore a lawman's star. I know you're in there, Morrison. Hutchins called out, his voice carrying across the desert evening. Garrett sends his regards. Elijah stayed silent, watching, calculating. 6 men, but they weren't positioned right for an assault. Too spread out, too relaxed. This wasn't an attack. It was something else. He wants to make you a deal, Hutchins continued. The girl for the woman. Clara Morton for Sarah Morrison. Fair trade, wouldn't you say? Beside him, Clara's breath hitched. Sarah's not your wife's maiden name. No, Elijah said quietly. It was Parker. If they're calling her Sarah Morrison, they made her take your name. Why? Control. Garrett likes his symbols. Elijah studied the riders, noting how Hutchins kept touching his gun nervously. They're scared. Of you. Of what we represent. Garrett wouldn't offer a trade unless he was worried. Hutchins grew impatient with the silence. You've got 1 minute to decide Morrison. After that, we start sending pieces of Sarah to you, starting with her fingers. Clara grabbed Elijah's arm. You can't trade me. You know what they'll do. I'm not trading anyone. He stepped partially into view, enough for them to see his silhouette, but not get a clear shot. Tell Garrett if he harms Sarah, I'll burn his entire world to the ground. Every crooked judge, every bought marshal, every dirty businessman. I've got his papers, Hutchins. All of them. The false sheriff shifted in his saddle. You're bluffing. Ask him about the cattleman's bank deposits, April through June '68. Ask him about the Hernandez family. Ask him about what really happened to Judge Cooper's wife. Even from a distance, Elijah could see Hutchins go rigid. Those were names that weren't supposed to be known secrets Garrett thought were buried forever. 1 hour. Hutchins finally said, "Garrett will meet you at Skeleton Ridge, alone. You bring the girl and the papers, he brings Sarah. Anyone else shows up, both women die." "Skeleton Ridge is a killing ground," Clara whispered. "No cover for half a mile in any direction." "I know." Elijah watched the riders wheel their horses around, heading back toward town. "That's why we're not going." "What?" He turned to her, and in the dying light, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. "Hope." "Your father's plan. The mercenaries. How long would it take to reach them?" "They're in Prescott. 2 days' ride, maybe less if we push. But we don't have 2 days. Sarah's survived 5 years. She can survive 2 more days. And Garrett won't kill her, not yet. She's his only leverage." Elijah moved back into the cave, gathering their meager supplies. "He'll wait at Skeleton Ridge. When we don't show, he'll rage, maybe hurt her, but not kill her. Then he'll send men after us. By the time he figures out where we've gone, we'll have help." Clara winced as she tried to help pack. "You're gambling with her life." "I'm gambling with all our lives. But it's better odds than walking into Garrett's trap." He paused, studying her pale face. "Can you ride?" "I'll have to." They emerged from the cave as full dark settled over the desert. Duchess nickered softly, pleased to see them. Elijah lifted Clara into the saddle, trying not to notice how she bit her lip against the pain. He swung up behind her, one arm around her waist to steady her. "Which way to Prescott?" he asked. "North through Devil's Canyon, then west along the rim. It's rough terrain, but Garrett's men won't expect it. They'll watch the main roads." They rode through the night, navigating by stars and instinct. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness, her body burning with fever again, despite the cool desert air. Elijah held her tight, whispering encouragement when she moaned, stopping only to give her water and check her bandages. Near dawn, they reached Devil's Canyon, a twisted maze of red rock and narrow passages that looked like God had taken a giant axe to the earth. Clara roused enough to guide them through her memory of the landscape surprising him. "Papa brought me here once," she explained, her voice weak but clear. "When I was 15, said every Morton should know the secret ways through the territory, in case we ever needed to run. He was preparing you." "Maybe. Or maybe he just wanted to share something with me. And the only thing he knew how to share was survival." They stopped to rest in a grove of cottonwoods near a small spring. Elijah refilled their canteens while Clara sat propped against a tree, her face gray with exhaustion. When he returned, he found her reading through her father's documents, tears streaming down her face. "What is it?" She held up a letter, her father's handwriting shaky with emotion. "It's dated 3 days before he died. He never sent it." She read aloud, her voice breaking. "My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, then I have failed you one final time. I pray you can forgive a foolish old man who loved you more than life itself, but never knew how to say it. You are the best thing I ever did, the only pure thing in my complicated world. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become. I see her in you every day. Her strength, her fire, her inability to suffer fools. I should have told you this every day. I should have been the father you deserved. Instead, I hid behind duty and politics, thinking I was protecting you, when really, I was just protecting myself from the pain of possibly losing you too. Find Elijah Morrison. Trust him. He is the only truly good man I ever knew in this cesspool of corruption. Tell him about Sarah. Save her if you can. But most importantly, save yourself. Live, Clara. Live the life your mother and I never could. Live free and unafraid. All my love, Papa." Clara folded the letter carefully, pressing it against her chest. He knew he was going to die. He was trying to protect you. Story of my life. Men trying to protect me instead of trusting me. She looked up at him, green eyes fierce despite her weakness. Don't do that, Elijah. Don't treat me like glass. I might break, but I'd rather shatter fighting than survive in a cage. Your mother teach you that too? No, that one I learned myself. They heard horses approaching from the east. Elijah was on his feet, instantly rifle ready. But instead of Garrett's men, a lone rider appeared, moving slow and careful hands visible. That's close enough, Elijah called out. The rider stopped pushing back his hat. Elijah Morrison, Christ Almighty, it really is you. Elijah lowered his rifle slightly. Samuel Freeman looked older, grayer, but his honest face was unmistakable. I heard rumors. Hutchins was drunk at the saloon bragging about hunting a ghost. I had to see for myself. It's not safe, Sam. Garrett can go to hell. Samuel dismounted, approaching slowly. I never believed you killed them, Elijah. Never. But when you disappeared, what could I do? Garrett had all the power, all the proof. His eyes landed on Clara. Miss Morton, I heard about your father. I'm sorry. Mr. Freeman. Clara tried to stand but swayed dangerously. Elijah caught her before she fell. She's hurt bad, Samuel observed. I know a doctor in Prescott, my cousin. He's clean, hates Garrett as much as anyone. Let me help. Elijah hesitated. 5 years of solitude had made trust a foreign concept. I lost my son to Garrett's protection racket, Samuel said quietly. He couldn't pay, so they broke his legs. Infection took him. I've been waiting 5 years for a chance at justice. Let me help. We need to reach mercenaries in Prescott, Clara said before Elijah could refuse. Papa hired them, the Black Dogs Company. Samuel nodded. I know them. Good men if you can afford them. I've got fresh horses at my ranch supplies ammunition. It's only 3 miles from here. It could be a trap, Elijah warned. Could be, Samuel agreed. But look at her, Elijah. She won't make it to Prescott without help. And you can't fight Garrett alone no matter how much ghost anger you're carrying. Elijah looked at Clara, pale and trembling, but still defiant. Then at Samuel, whose eyes held nothing but honest pain and determination. Why? He asked. Why risk everything now? Samuel smiled sadly. Because I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of living under Garrett's boot. Your wife was kind to my Mary when she was sick. Your boy played with my grandson. They deserved better. We all did. Still do, Clara added softly. Something shifted in the morning air, like the desert itself was holding its breath. 3 broken people standing at a crossroads, each carrying their own ghosts, their own rage, their own desperate hope for redemption. All right, Elijah said finally, but we move fast. Garrett will realize we're not coming to Skeleton Ridge soon. They transferred Clara to Samuel's horse, fresher and stronger than poor Duchess, who'd carried them through the night. The ride to the Freeman Ranch was tense, every shadow potentially hiding Garrett's men. But they met no one except a few startled jackrabbits and a hawk circling lazy against the morning sky. The ranch sat in a valley between 2 mesas, modest but well-maintained. Mary Freeman stood on the porch, a shotgun in her hands that she lowered when she recognized her husband. Sam, what? Her eyes widened as she saw Elijah. Dear God, Elijah Morrison. Hello, Mary. She ran to him, tears streaming, and pulled him into a fierce embrace. We thought you were dead. We mourned you. Part of me was. Mary pulled back, seeing Clara slumped in the saddle. Get her inside, now. They carried Clara to a bed, Mary immediately taking charge with the efficiency of a woman who'd raised 6 children and buried 2. She cleaned and redressed the wound, forcing willow bark tea down Clara's throat for the fever. She's strong, Mary declared. She'll make it, but she needs rest. We don't have time, Clara protested weakly. You have to make time, Mary said firmly. Dead martyrs don't win wars. While Clara slept, Elijah and Samuel planned. The Black Dogs were led by a former Union officer named Jonathan Pike. 20 men, all veterans, all expensive but reliable. Morton paid them half up front, Samuel explained, reading through the papers. The rest on completion. They're waiting at the Silver Dollar in Prescott. That's Garrett's territory. No, Prescott's federal. Garrett has influence, but not control. It's why Morton chose it. Elijah studied the maps, memorizing routes and alternatives. We'll need a distraction when we extract Sarah. I might have an idea about that, Samuel said. There's a Cattlemen's Association meeting tomorrow night. Every rancher in the territory will be there, including Garrett's men. They'll be drinking distracted. You'll be there. I have to be. If I don't show Garrett, we'll know something's wrong. Samuel met Elijah's eyes. But I can make sure certain doors are unlocked, certain guards are given the wrong information. That's dangerous, Sam. Everything we're doing is dangerous. At least this gives us a chance. Clara stirred, crying out in her sleep. Papa, no, don't leave me. Elijah moved to her bedside, taking her hand. She calmed at his touch, fingers gripping his like he was an anchor in a storm. Mary watched from the doorway, a knowing look in her eyes. She trusts you, Mary observed. She doesn't have much choice. No, it's more than that. That girl's been alone her whole life, even surrounded by people. She recognizes something in you. Mary paused. Margaret would want you to live again, Elijah. Not just survive. Live. Margaret's dead. Her body is. But love doesn't die that easy. It just changes shape, finds new vessels. She looked at Clara. That girl needs someone to live for, and you need someone to protect. Maybe God's giving you both a second chance. God took my first chance. Garrett took it. Don't give him credit for God's work. Mary's voice turned sharp. And don't you dare dishonor Margaret's memory by giving up. She'd box your ears for even thinking it. Despite everything, Elijah almost smiled. Mary Freeman had never minced words. As afternoon wore on, Clara's fever broke for good. She woke clear-eyed, immediately asking about their plans. When Samuel explained about the mercenaries and the Cattlemen's Association, she nodded thoughtfully. We'll need proof of life for Sarah before we pay the black dogs the rest, she said. And we'll need somewhere safe to take her after. Garrett will burn the territory to find us. There's a mission in the mountains, Samuel suggested. Father Miguel runs it. He's harbored fugitives before, and Garrett won't violate sanctuary. Bad for his public image. Since when does Garrett care about his image? Since he decided he wants to be territorial governor, he needs the Catholic vote for that. They refined the plan as the sun set, each detail carefully considered. It was risky, required precise timing and more luck than any of them had a right to expect, but it was better than riding into Garrett's trap. As night fell, Clara insisted on walking outside, needing air and sky after the closeness of the sick room. Elijah supported her, and they stood together, watching the stars emerge. My mother loved nights like this, Clara said softly. Said the stars were letters from heaven telling us we're not alone. Margaret said something similar, said each star was a soul watching over someone they loved. Do you believe that? Elijah considered. I want to. Some nights I swear I can feel them. Margaret, Thomas, watching, waiting. For what? For me to either join them or give them justice. Maybe both. Clara turned to face him, her hand still on his arm for support. What if they're waiting for something else? What if they're waiting for you to forgive yourself? There's nothing to forgive. I failed them. You loved them. That's not failure. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her, their faces suddenly close. Love is never failure, Elijah. It's the only success that matters. For a moment, they stood frozen, two damaged souls recognizing something in each other that transcended their individual pain. Then Clara winced hand going to her side, and the moment broke. We should get you back inside, Elijah said. In a moment. I need to remember this. Remember what? What it feels like to not be alone. They stood together under the vast desert sky, surrounded by ghosts and dangers. But for just that moment, they were simply two people finding unexpected comfort in shared grief and tentative hope. Tomorrow would bring violence and possibly death. But tonight, They had this, a moment of peace in the eye of the storm, and somewhere in the darkness, James Garrett waited at Skeleton Ridge, growing angrier with each passing hour, not knowing that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around him. The ghosts were rising, and they would have their due. The morning brought unexpected visitors. Elijah woke to Mary Freeman's urgent whisper and the sound of multiple horses approaching. He grabbed his rifle, moving to the window, but Mary stopped him. "It's Father Miguel," she said. "With others. They're flying a white flag." Father Miguel was a small man with kind eyes and hands scarred from years of working with his flock. But the woman riding beside him made Elijah's blood freeze. Sarah, older, thinner, her honey-colored hair now streaked with premature gray, but unmistakably Margaret's sister. "It's a trap," Elijah said, checking his ammunition. "No trap." Father Miguel called out, his voice carrying the authority of absolute faith. She escaped. God provides miracles when we need them most. Sarah dismounted slowly, as if she'd forgotten how her body worked. When she saw Elijah, her face crumbled. "I thought you were dead. He told me you were dead. Said you killed them then yourself. But I knew you'd never hurt Margaret or Thomas." Elijah stood frozen as Sarah approached. She looked so much like Margaret, it was like seeing a ghost. But when she embraced him, she felt real solid alive. "How?" was all he managed. "The guards got word about Skeleton Ridge. All of them left except one, and he was drunk. I hit him with a cooking pot, took his keys." Sarah pulled back, studying his face. 5 years, Elijah. 5 years I've been planning, waiting, praying for a chance. Why didn't he kill you?" Sarah's face darkened. "He enjoyed knowing I was suffering, would visit, sometimes tell me about how everyone believed you were a murderer, how Clara Morton was going to die just like her parents, how he owned everything and everyone." "Sarah," Clara's voice came from the doorway. She stood supported by the frame, pale but determined. "You're Sarah Parker." "Morrison," Sarah corrected. "I took my sister's name the day Garrett took my freedom. If I was going to suffer, I'd suffer as family." Her eyes softened. "You're Mayor Morton's daughter. I'm so sorry about your father. He was trying to save you." "I know. Garrett bragged about killing him. Said Morton was too noble for his own good." Sarah moved to Clara, taking her hands. "Your father was a good man. He sent food sometimes through intermediaries. Kept me alive when I wanted to die." Father Miguel cleared his throat. "We don't have much time. Garrett's men are searching everywhere. When they find that guard, they'll come here." "Then we leave now," Elijah said. "No." Clara's voice carried surprising strength. "We make our stand here." Everyone turned to look at her. "I'm tired of running," she continued. "My father ran from his grief. You ran from your pain, Elijah. Sarah's been running even while standing still. It ends now." "Clara, you're not strong enough." "I'm strong enough to make a choice." She looked at Elijah, and something in her eyes made his chest tighten. "Samuel, you said Prescott has a judge who still follows the law." "Judge Harrison." "Yes." "And Father Miguel, you can perform marriages." The priest nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Clara." Elijah started, but she raised her hand. "Hear me out. Garrett's power comes from fear and isolation. He picks us off one by one because we're alone. But if we bind ourselves together publicly, legally, we become harder to dismiss." She took a deep breath. "Elijah Morrison, I'm asking you to marry me." The room went silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. "You're delirious," Elijah said finally. "I'm practical. As your wife, I can't be compelled to testify against you. As my husband, you have legal standing to pursue justice for my father's murder. Together, we present a united front that Garrett can't easily eliminate without bringing federal attention. That's not a reason to marry someone." "No." Clara stepped closer, swaying slightly but holding his gaze. "Then how about this? I've been alone my entire life. So have you for the last 5 years. We understand each other's darkness. We both want justice. And maybe, just maybe, we could help each other heal. You don't know me. I know you rode through the night to save a stranger. I know you've carried your family's memory like sacred fire. I know you look at me and see someone worth protecting, not just another burden." Her voice dropped. "And I know that when you held me in that cave, I felt safe for the first time since my mother died." Mary Freeman spoke up. "It's not the craziest idea. Marriage would give you both legal protections. And, frankly, Elijah, that girl's the first person to crack through your armor in 5 years." "This is insane," Elijah said, but his conviction was wavering. Sarah touched his arm. "Margaret would understand. She'd want you to live to love again." "I can't love again. That part of me died with them." "No," Clara said firmly. "It's wounded, maybe scarred, but not dead. I'm not asking you to love me like you loved Margaret. I'm asking you to let us save each other." Father Miguel stepped forward. Perhaps God works in mysterious ways. 2 souls broken by the same evil, finding each other in the wilderness. It has a certain biblical poetry. Elijah looked around the room. Samuel and Mary, hope in their eyes. Father Miguel, serene with faith. Sarah Margaret's sister, nodding encouragement. And Clara, young and wounded, but blazing with determination. "You could die," he said to Clara. "Garrett will come for us both." "I'd rather die as Clara Morrison fighting beside someone who understands me than live as Clara Morton alone and afraid." Something shifted in Elijah's chest, a wall crumbling that he'd spent 5 years building. This wasn't about love or romance. It was about choosing to stop being a ghost, choosing to matter to someone again, and to let someone matter to him. "All right," he said quietly. Clara's eyes widened. "Really? But we do this right. Legal marriage in Prescott with Judge Harrison. Church blessing from Father Miguel. Make it so public Garrett can't deny it happened." "That's dangerous," Samuel warned. "You'll be exposing yourself." "I'm done hiding. Clara's right. We make our stand." Within an hour, they were preparing to leave. Mary had found one of her daughter's old dresses for Clara, simple but clean. Sarah helped her wash and pin up her hair, the 2 women bonding over their shared losses. "You're brave," Sarah said, braiding Clara's hair. "Braver than I was." "You survived 5 years of captivity. That's its own kind of brave." "I survived. You're choosing to fight. There's a difference." Sarah paused. "He's a good man, Elijah. Broken but good." "I know." "Do you love him?" Clara considered. "I think I could, given time and peace. But for now, I need him, and he needs me. Sometimes that's enough to start." Meanwhile, Elijah stood with Samuel and Father Miguel planning their route to Prescott. "We'll take the old mining road," Samuel suggested. "Longer, but less traveled." "I'll ride ahead," Father Miguel offered. "Let Judge Harrison know you're coming. He'll need time to prepare. Ensure federal marshals are present." "This could all go wrong," Elijah warned. "Yes," Father Miguel agreed. "But doing nothing has already gone wrong. At least this way you're choosing your fate." As they prepared to leave, Sarah pulled Elijah aside. "I need to tell you something about that night. Margaret fought them. She wounded 2 before she was brave, Elijah. And Thomas, he tried to protect her. An 8-year-old boy standing against grown men. You raised him right." Elijah's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I should have been there. Then you'd be dead too, and Garrett would have won completely. Margaret would want you to do this to find happiness again." "This isn't about happiness." Sarah studied him. "Isn't it that girl looks at you like you hung the moon, and you look at her like she's the first sunrise after endless night? It's just mutual need. That's how the best marriages start. Margaret and you needed each other too. Remember, she needed adventure. You needed gentleness. Need becomes care. Care becomes love. Give it time." The convoy that left the Freeman Ranch was larger than expected. Mary had quietly spread word, and several neighboring ranchers had chosen to ride with them. men and women who'd suffered under Garrett's rule, ready to witness and protect this act of defiance. Clara rode beside Elijah, her back straight, despite the pain. "Are you sure about this?" he asked her one more time. "I've never been more sure of anything." She reached over, taking his hand. "We're going to win, Elijah, not just against Garrett, but for ourselves. We're going to prove that broken people can build something whole." As they rode toward Prescott, toward a marriage neither had expected and a battle both had chosen, the sun climbed higher. Behind them, dust rose from more riders. Garrett's men had found the unconscious guard and were following. "They're coming," Samuel observed. "Let them come," Clara said. "Let them see that we're not afraid anymore." "You realize this makes you a target," Elijah told her. "I was already a target. Now I'm a target with a partner." She squeezed his hand. "That makes all the difference." The town of Prescott appeared ahead, bustling with morning activity. Judge Harrison's courthouse stood at the center, federal flag flying proud. Father Miguel was already there, having ridden ahead, standing with the judge and 2 federal marshals. As they dismounted, Garrett's men thundered into town, led by Hutchins. "Stop!" he shouted. "That woman is a fugitive." On whose authority, Judge Harrison stepped forward, a stern man with steel gray hair. "Sheriff's authority." "You're not a real Sheriff Hutchins, and we all know it," the judge replied. "These people are under federal protection while in my jurisdiction." Hutchins's hand went to his gun, but the federal marshals drew faster. "I wouldn't," one said calmly. Clara stood tall, addressing the gathering crowd. "I'm Clara Morton, daughter of Mayor Theodore Morton, who was murdered by James Garrett. I have proof of Garrett's crimes, and I'm here to marry Elijah Morrison, the rightful sheriff Garrett tried to murder 5 years ago." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The story of the Morrison family massacre was well known, but everyone had believed Elijah was the killer. "That's a lie," Hutchins shouted. "Is it?" Sarah stepped forward. "I'm Sarah Parker, Margaret Morrison's sister. I've been Garrett's prisoner for 5 years because I witnessed his men leaving the Morrison house that night." More gasps, more murmurs. The crowd was growing drawn by the drama. Judge Harrison raised his hand for silence. "These are serious accusations that will be properly investigated. But today, if these 2 people wish to marry, and both are of sound mind and legal age, I see no impediment." "This is wrong," Hutchins sputtered. "What's wrong?" Clara said, her voice carrying across the square. "Is a man like Garrett controlling our lives through fear? What's wrong is good people staying silent while evil flourishes. Today that changes." She turned to Elijah and in front of the entire town took both his hands. "Today we choose each other. We choose to fight. We choose to hope." Elijah looked into her green eyes and saw not Margaret, not the past, but a future he hadn't dared imagine. "Let's do this." They walked into the courthouse together, the crowd following Hutchins and his men, forced to watch as their carefully constructed world began to crumble. The marriage certificate was signed, Judge Harrison presiding, Sarah and Samuel as witnesses. Father Miguel blessed their union, his words simple but powerful. "What God has brought together in the wilderness, let no man tear asunder. May your union be a fortress against evil and a beacon of hope for all who suffer under tyranny." As they emerged from the courthouse, now husband and wife, Clara whispered to Elijah, "No turning back now." "No," he agreed, surprising himself with a small smile. "No turning back." Hutchins had retreated to the saloon, frantically sending telegrams to Garrett. The war was coming, but for this moment, in the bright morning sun, surrounded by people ready to stand with them, Elijah and Clara Morrison had won their first battle. They'd chosen each other, chosen to fight, chosen to stop being victims. And in that choosing, they'd already begun to defeat James Garrett. The ghost sheriff had risen, and he'd brought an army of other ghosts with him. The living who'd been dead inside, now ready to reclaim their lives. The real fight was just beginning. The abandoned Morrison homestead sat 3 miles outside Prescott, untouched for 5 years, like a tomb waiting to be opened. Elijah stood at the gate, his new wife beside him, neither moving to enter. The house looked exactly as he'd left it that terrible night, except now wild roses had claimed the porch railings and dust had painted the windows opaque. "We don't have to do this," Clara said softly. "We could stay in town, get a room at the boarding house." "No. If we're going to fight Garrett, we do it from here. This is my land, my home. He doesn't get to take that too." Sarah stood behind them with Father Miguel and the Freemans. "Margaret planted those roses," she said. The week before she died, said she wanted Thomas to grow up surrounded by beauty. Elijah pushed open the gate. It screamed on rusted hinges, the sound sharp as memory. They walked up the path together, Clara's hand in his, both supporting each other. The front door was still broken from where Garrett's men had kicked it in. Dark stains marked the hallway floor, and Clara didn't need to ask what they were. "I'll help clean," Mary Freeman said briskly, already rolling up her sleeves. "Samuel, get the tools from the wagon. This place needs life in it again." What followed was a resurrection of sorts. The community that had ridden with them to Prescott stayed to help. Windows were washed, floors scrubbed, broken furniture hauled away. Someone had saved Margaret's dishes, packed them carefully in a trunk in the barn. Her quilts were still in the cedar chest, protected from moths and time. Clara worked despite her injury, organizing and directing when she couldn't lift. She found Margaret's journal in the bedroom drawer and brought it to Elijah. "You should have this." He opened it to the last entry dated the day she died. "Elijah works so hard to keep us safe, but I worry the danger is closer than he knows. Something about Deputy Garrett frightens me. The way he looks at me when Elijah isn't watching. If anything happens to us, I pray someone finds this and knows we were happy. We were loved. We were a family." Elijah closed the journal, unable to speak. Clara took it gently, placing it on the mantel. "We'll keep it there, so they're still part of this home." By evening, the house was livable again, different, marked by absence, but clean and waiting for new memories. The helpers departed with promises to return tomorrow with supplies and furniture. Soon it was just Elijah and Clara alone in the house where his first family had died. "Strange honeymoon," Clara said, attempting levity as she sat at the kitchen table. "Strange marriage." Elijah countered, heating water for coffee. They sat in awkward silence, the weight of their impulsive decision settling over them. They were married, legally bound, but they were still essentially strangers who'd known each other for less than a week. "I should check your wound," Elijah said, grateful for something practical to focus on. Clara nodded, unbuttoning her dress enough to expose the bandages. The wound was healing cleaner now, the edges pink instead of angry red. As Elijah changed the dressing, his hands gentle and clinical, Clara spoke. "My parents' wedding night, my mother locked herself in the bathroom and cried for 2 hours. She told me that when I was 16. Said she was terrified she'd made a mistake marrying a man she'd known for only 3 months. What changed her mind? Papa sat outside the door and read to her all night. Poetry, scripture, even newspaper articles. His voice was the bridge between what she feared and what she hoped. By morning, she opened the door, and they were happy. For a while, until the territory started eating at them. The isolation, the violence, the constant struggle. It changed them both. Clara winced as he tightened the bandage, but she never regretted marrying him, just regretted what they let the world do to them. We won't let that happen. How can you be sure? Elijah secured the bandage and sat back. Because we're already broken, can't break what's already in pieces. We can only rebuild. That night, they slept in separate rooms. Clara took the guest room. Elijah couldn't bring himself to enter the master bedroom where he'd slept with Margaret. Instead, he sat in Thomas's old room surrounded by the boys' toys still scattered on the shelves. A wooden horse, a set of marbles, the toy gun Elijah had carved. Near dawn, he heard Clara crying out in her sleep. He found her thrashing in the narrow bed, caught in a nightmare. "Papa, don't leave me. Please, I'll be better. I'll be quieter. Just don't leave." He touched her shoulder gently. "Clara, wake up. You're safe." Her eyes flew open, wild and unfocused. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then reality crashed back. "Elijah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "Don't apologize for nightmares. God knows I have enough of my own." She sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Do they ever stop?" "No. But they visit less often when you're not alone." "Is that an invitation?" "It's an observation." She studied his face in the pale pre-dawn light. "You could stay, just to sleep, just so neither of us is alone." It was a dangerous line to cross, but the exhaustion in her eyes matched his own. He sat on top of the covers, back against the headboard. Clara curled against his side, her head on his shoulder, and they both fell into the first peaceful sleep either had managed in days. They woke to pounding on the door and Samuel Freeman's urgent voice. "Elijah Ryder's coming, Garrett himself." They scrambled up, Elijah grabbing his gun, Clara quickly dressing. Through the window, they could see a dust cloud approaching. 6 riders with James Garrett's distinctive black stallion in the lead. "Stay inside," Elijah ordered. "Like hell." Clara picked up Margaret's old rifle from beside the door. "We face him together or not at all." They stepped onto the porch as Garrett's group arrived. James Garrett looked exactly as Elijah remembered, tall, lean, with pale eyes that held all the warmth of winter stone. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and prosperity had added weight to his frame, but the cruel twist of his mouth remained unchanged. "Well, well," Garrett said, not dismounting. "The ghost and his child bride. How touching." "State your business, or get off my land," Elijah said evenly. "Your land. I think you'll find there's a lien against this property. Unpaid taxes for 5 years. It belongs to the bank now." "My bank." Clara stepped forward. "Actually, those taxes were paid yesterday, by me, with my inheritance. The receipt is filed with Judge Harrison." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "You little bitch. You think you're clever. I think I'm legal. This is the Morrison homestead, and you're trespassing." "You can't protect her forever, Elijah," Garrett said, ignoring Clara. "She has something that belongs to me." "The evidence of your crimes belongs to the federal marshals now," Elijah replied. "Copies have been sent to the territorial governor, the attorney general, and 3 newspapers. You're finished, Garrett." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Garrett's eyes. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Why don't you ask Hutchins about the warrants Judge Harrison is preparing? Or maybe ask your banker friends why their accounts have been frozen pending investigation." Garrett's hand moved toward his gun, but stopped as several neighbors emerged from behind the house and barn, all armed. The Freemans, Father Miguel, and others who'd had enough of Garrett's reign. "This isn't over," Garrett snarled. "No," Elijah agreed. "It's just beginning, but you're not dealing with one broken man anymore. You're dealing with all of us." Garrett wheeled his horse around violently. "You'll regret this, Morrison. You and your whore wife both." The rifle in Clara's hands cracked the bullet, whistling past Garrett's ear, taking his hat clean off. "The next one won't miss," she said calmly. "And call me a whore again, I'll make you a soprano." The neighbors chuckled, and Garrett's face went purple with rage. But he rode off without another word, his men following. "That was reckless," Elijah told Clara once they were gone. "That was necessary. He needs to know I'm not some fragile flower he can intimidate." She swayed slightly, the effort having taxed her still healing body. Elijah caught her, leading her back inside. "You need to rest." "I need to learn to shoot better. That was luck more than skill." "I'll teach you." "When?" "Now, if you're up for it." They spent the afternoon in the field behind the house, Elijah teaching Clara to properly handle Margaret's rifle. She was a quick learner, her mother's early lessons providing a foundation. By sunset, she could hit a bottle at 50 yards more often than not. "You're a natural," he told her. I have a good teacher. She looked at him sideways. Did you teach Margaret to shoot? She taught me, actually. Boston ladies learn all sorts of surprising things. She could also pick locks, play poker, and swear in 3 languages. Clara laughed, the sound bright in the cooling air. I would have liked her. She would have liked you. Would have said you had spine. They walked back to the house as stars began appearing. The neighbors had left food, fresh bread, a pot of stew, preserved peaches. A wedding feast of sorts, though neither mentioned it. As they ate, Clara asked, "What was your wedding to Margaret like?" "Small. Just us, the minister, and 2 witnesses. She wore her mother's dress, and I was so nervous. I put the ring on the wrong hand at first." He smiled at the memory. "She laughed so hard she cried, and the minister had to start over." Sounds perfect. It was. Simple and real. He looked at her. Like ours in a way. Ours was born from desperation. Maybe. But also from choice. We chose to stop being victims. Clara reached across the table, taking his hand. I don't regret it. It's been one day. The best day I've had in years. I woke up with purpose, with partners, with hope. Her thumb traced circles on his palm. That's worth any risk. That evening, Sarah arrived with a wagon full of supplies and furniture. Thought you could use some proper bedding, she said, unloading quilts and pillows. And I brought something else. She pulled out a daguerreotype in a silver frame. The image showed Margaret and Thomas formal and still, as all such pictures required, but their love for each other evident even in the frozen moment. I saved it, Sarah explained. Took it that night when I ran. Thought someday someone should remember them as they were not as Garrett made them. Elijah took the picture with shaking hands. Thomas stood so proud in his Sunday best, Margaret's hand on his shoulder. They looked ready to conquer the world together. Thank you, he managed. Clara took the picture, gently placing it on the mantel next to Margaret's journal. They belong here. This is still their home, too. Sarah stayed for dinner, the 3 of them finding unexpected comfort in shared grief and growing determination. She told stories of Margaret as a girl, wild and fearless, always dragging Sarah into adventures. Clara shared memories of her mother, equally fierce beneath her proper exterior. Strong women, Sarah observed. Both of them. They'd be proud of what we're doing. Would they? Elijah wondered aloud. Margaret would kick your ass for doubting it, Sarah said bluntly, making Clara nearly choke on her water from laughing. As the evening wore on, they planned. The mercenaries from Prescott had agreed to help, but they needed more evidence, more witnesses. Garrett's network was vast, but it had weak points. The brothel owner, Rosalie, Sarah suggested. She hates Garrett but has been too scared to move against him. She might have information. And the Chinese workers at the mine, Clara added. Papa said they keep records of everything, including who really owns what. We'll need to move carefully, Elijah warned. Garrett will strike back soon. Let him try, Clara said fiercely. We're ready. That night, without discussion, they both ended up in the same room again. Not as lovers, but as partners who understood that darkness was easier to bear when shared. Clara curled against Elijah's side, her breathing evening out quickly. But Elijah lay awake, acutely aware of her warmth, her trust, the way she fit against him like she belonged there. It wasn't Margaret would never be Margaret, but it was something unexpected and precious growing from the ashes of their respective tragedies. Elijah, Clara murmured half asleep. Yes. Thank you. For choosing to fight. For choosing us. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, surprising himself with the tenderness of the gesture. Thank you for reminding me I could. Outside, coyotes howled at the moon, and the wind whispered through Margaret's roses. The house that had stood empty for 5 years was full again, not with the same family, but with something new, something that honored the past while reaching toward the future, They'd built the beginning of a home in just one day. Not perfect, not without ghosts, but theirs. And tomorrow they'd continue building one board, one nail, one shared moment at a time. The war with Garrett was coming, but tonight they had a kitchen that smelled of bread, a mantle that held precious memories, and two people learning that broken hearts could still beat in harmony. It was enough. More than enough. It was a beginning. 2 weeks into their marriage, the Morrison homestead had become a center of quiet revolution. What started as a handful of supporters had grown into something larger, more dangerous. Every evening, wagons arrived after dark, carrying people who'd suffered under Garrett's rule. They came seeking hope, justice, or simply the sight of someone finally standing up to the man who'd terrorized the territory for a decade. Clara had transformed the barn into a meeting hall of sorts, hanging lanterns from the rafters and arranging hay bales for seating. She moved among the gathered crowds with natural grace, her wound nearly healed, listening to stories and documenting crimes. Each testimony was carefully recorded, another nail in Garrett's coffin. Mrs. Chen lost her husband to Garrett's men, Clara told Elijah one evening, indicating an elderly Chinese woman sitting quietly in the corner. They wanted protection money he couldn't pay, so they threw him down a mine shaft. Called it an accident. How many others? 17 confirmed murders we can prove, dozens more suspicious deaths, and that's just in the last 2 years. Elijah watched his young wife work, marveling at her transformation. The frightened girl he'd found bleeding in the desert had become a force of nature, channeling her grief into purposeful action. She'd also become something else, the heart of their makeshift family. Sarah had moved in permanently, taking over the household management with quiet efficiency. The Freemans visited daily, bringing supplies and news. Father Miguel held services in their parlor every Sunday, the house overflowing with people who'd stopped attending church in town for fear of Garrett's spies. It was during one of these services that the first real test came. Riders approaching, Samuel Freeman called from his watch position. Everyone tensed, hands moving to weapons. But instead of Garrett's men, a lone rider appeared, slumped in his saddle. As he drew closer, gasps rippled through the crowd. It was Marcus Wells, Mayor Morton's former secretary, the man who'd betrayed him. "Shoot him!" someone shouted. "Wait!" Clara commanded, stepping forward. Her face was stone as Wells practically fell from his horse. "Please!" Wells gasped. He was in bad shape, black eye, split lip, what looked like broken ribs from how he held himself. "Please, Mrs. Morrison, I need help." "You betrayed my father," Clara said coldly. "You led him to his death." "I know. God, I know." Wells dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his battered face. "Garrett threatened my daughter, said he'd sell her to the brothels if I didn't cooperate. I thought I could control it, minimize the damage. I was wrong." "Where is your daughter now?" Elijah asked. "Dead." The word came out broken. Garrett killed her anyway. Said loose ends were bad for business. She was 14. The crowd's anger shifted to uncomfortable sympathy. Many of them had faced similar impossible choices. Clara knelt in front of Wells, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Tell me everything, every detail about Garrett's operation, every name, every crime, every secret. Hold nothing back, and I'll consider not putting a bullet in your head myself." Wells talked for 3 hours straight. He revealed Garrett's entire network. Judges he'd bought, lawmen, he'd corrupted politicians, he'd blackmailed. He knew where the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. Most importantly, he knew about Garrett's meeting with the territorial governor next month, where Garrett planned to present fabricated evidence that Elijah and Clara were leading an insurrection. "He's going to paint you as outlaws," Wells explained. "Bring in federal troops to crush you. Then we strike first," Clara said. She turned to address the gathered crowd. "We have 4 weeks to bring Garrett down legally. After that, he'll have the government's backing." Jonathan Pike, leader of the Black Dogs mercenaries, stepped forward. The former Union officer had arrived 3 days ago with his men, 20 hardened veterans who'd seen too much war to be intimidated by a corrupt deputy mayor. "My men are ready," Pike said. "Just give the word." "Not yet," Elijah cautioned. "We need more than force. We need public opinion." That's when Rosalie spoke up. The brothel madam had arrived an hour ago, her painted face unable to hide the bruises Garrett's men had given her for refusing to provide information about Clara's supporters. "I can help with that," she said. "Half the territorial legislature visits my girls. They talk when they're drunk. I have enough scandal to destroy Garrett's political allies." "Blackmail?" Father Miguel asked uncomfortably. "Justice," Rosalie countered. "These men vote for laws that let Garrett operate while publicly preaching morality. Let them explain their hypocrisy to their wives and constituents." Clara stood addressing the room with natural authority. "We're going to hit Garrett from every direction at once. Financial, legal, political, and, if necessary, military. But we do this smart. We're not outlaws. We're citizens demanding justice." The meeting broke up near midnight, people departing in small groups to avoid suspicion. Clara stood on the porch watching them go when she noticed a small figure hiding behind the water trough. "You can come out," she called softly. A boy emerged, maybe 10 years old, skinny as a fence post and twice as wary. He had the distinctive features of mixed heritage. Mexican mother, Anglo father, probably. "You're the ghost sheriff's wife," the boy said. "I am." "Who are you?" "Nobody. I bring a message." He pulled out a crumpled paper. "Lady said to give this to you. Said it was important." Clara read the note, her face paling. "Elijah, you need to see this." The note was from Charlotte Brennan, widow of the rancher whose property had been Sarah's prison. She wanted to meet, claimed to have information about Garrett that could destroy him, but would only share it with Clara alone. "It's a trap," Elijah said immediately. "Maybe. Or maybe she's another woman Garrett's pushed too far." Clara looked at the boy. "When does she want to meet?" "Tomorrow night. Old Mission at Skeleton Ridge." The same place Garrett had wanted to make the trade. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. "I'll go," Clara decided. "Not alone." She specified alone. "Then I follow at a distance." Clara shook her head. "If it's genuine, my going alone might be the only way she'll trust us. If it's a trap, you following won't help." They argued about it for an hour, but Clara wouldn't budge. Finally, Sarah suggested a compromise. "I'll go with her. 2 women together might not spook Charlotte." The next day brought unexpected visitors. Clara's maternal grandparents from Boston. They arrived in a private carriage, looking utterly out of place in their Eastern finery. "Grandmother," Clara gasped. "Grandfather, how did you—" "We received word of your father's death," her grandmother said stiffly. Elizabeth Hartley was 73, steel-haired and ramrod straight. "And of your precipitous marriage. You came all this way to disapprove." "We came," her grandfather William said more gently, "to ensure our only grandchild was safe." The reunion was awkward. The Hartleys had never approved of their daughter marrying Theodore Morton, considering him beneath their social station. They'd cut off contact when Clara's mother died, blaming the harsh territorial life for her death. "You could return with us," Elizabeth offered over tea. "To Boston, to civilization." "This is my home," Clara replied firmly. "This," Elizabeth gestured dismissively at the simple farmhouse. "Living like a frontier peasant. You're a Hartley. You deserve better." "I'm a Morrison now," Clara corrected. "And I'm exactly where I need to be." Elijah entered then dusty from working with the horses. The Hartleys examined him like he was a specimen in a museum. "So you're the man who married our granddaughter," Elizabeth said coolly. "I am." "Rather quickly from what we understand." "Rather necessarily," Elijah replied evenly. "Your granddaughter was being hunted by the man who murdered her father. Marriage provided legal protection." "And that's all it provides?" William asked shrewdly. Elijah and Clara exchanged glances. In the 2 weeks since their wedding, something had shifted between them. The awkwardness had eased into comfortable companionship. They moved around each other with practiced ease, communicated in half-sentences and meaningful looks. It wasn't love yet, but it was moving in that direction. It provides partnership, Clara said finally. Purpose. And perhaps given time, something more. That evening, as Clara prepared to meet Charlotte Brennan, her grandmother cornered her alone. "Your mother wrote to me before she died," Elizabeth said quietly. "She was afraid, said there were dangerous men circling your father, that she feared for your safety. I ignored her concerns, thought she was being dramatic. I was wrong. Grandmother, I failed my daughter. I won't fail you." Elizabeth pulled out a leather pouch heavy with coin. $10,000, enough to hire an army if needed. Clara hugged her grandmother, feeling the older woman stiffen, then slowly relax into the embrace. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just survive. You're all I have left of her." As Clara and Sarah rode toward Skeleton Ridge, Elijah positioned himself and Pike's men strategically along the route. If it was a trap, they'd respond quickly. The old mission was a crumbling adobe structure abandoned for decades. Charlotte Brennan stood in the doorway, a small woman with prematurely gray hair and nervous hands. "Thank you for coming," she said quickly. "I don't have much time. My husband isn't really dead." Clara and Sarah exchanged shocked looks. Garrett faked his death. Charlotte continued. Needed the ranch for keeping Sarah prisoner, but also needed Robert alive to sign certain documents. He's been held in the territorial prison under a false name for 2 years. I've been forced to play the grieving widow, or they'd kill him. "Why tell us now?" Sarah asked. "Because I'm pregnant, and Garrett plans to take the baby once it's born. Says he needs leverage over Robert for some land deal. I won't let him have my child." Clara pulled out paper and pencil. "Tell me everything. We'll get your husband out." Charlotte provided details. Guard schedules, which officials were clean, which were corrupted. She also revealed something stunning. Garrett had been embezzling from the territorial government for years, hiding it through a complex series of land transfers that Robert had been forced to facilitate. "There's a ledger," Charlotte said, "hidden in Garrett's office. It details everything, but it's in a safe only he can open. Unless he's dead," Clara said quietly. "Or arrested by federal marshals," Sarah added quickly, shooting Clara a warning look. As they prepared to leave, Charlotte grabbed Clara's hand. "Your father was a good man. He tried to help us. I'm sorry I couldn't warn him in time." Riding back, Clara and Sarah were silent, processing the magnitude of what they'd learned. Then they heard it. Gunfire ahead. They spurred their horses, racing toward the sound. In a canyon ahead, they found carnage. Elijah and Pike's men had been ambushed. 3 mercenaries were down, the others pinned behind rocks. Clara didn't hesitate. She rode straight into the fight, Margaret's rifle cracking. Her shot took one ambusher in the shoulder, sending him tumbling from his perch. "Clara, get back!" Elijah shouted. "Like hell!" She dismounted, taking cover beside him. "We're partners, remember?" Together, they fought, Clara proving her 2 weeks of practice had paid off. Sarah, surprising everyone, pulled out a hidden pistol and dropped an attacker who'd been flanking them. "Boston ladies learn all sorts of things," she said with a grim smile that reminded Elijah painfully of Margaret. The ambushers retreated, leaving 4 dead. Pike's losses were heavy. 3 good men gone. "Garrett knew we were coming," Pike said grimly. "No," Clara realized. "He knew I'd never resist meeting Charlotte. He used her as bait without her knowing." They returned home to find the house surrounded by armed neighbors. The community had heard the gunfire and mobilized. The Hartleys stood on the porch, Elizabeth holding a very expensive-looking rifle. "Boston ladies," she said crisply, "also know how to defend their family." That night, as they tended wounds and mourned the dead, Clara found herself truly understanding the cost of their fight. She stood at the graves they dug for Pike's men, Father Miguel saying prayers over them. James Morrison. She read from one marker. The mercenary had shared Elijah's first name. He had a daughter back east, Pike said quietly. Was doing this job to pay for her schooling. Clara knelt, placing wildflowers on the grave. We'll make sure she gets that education. Elijah stood beside her, his hand finding hers. The killing's going to get worse before it's over. I know. She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. But we can't stop now. Too many people are counting on us. Your grandparents want you to leave. My grandparents will have to accept that I'm exactly where I belong. Later, as the house settled into uneasy sleep, Clara found Elijah sitting in Thomas's room again, holding the wooden gun he'd carved for his son. Tell me about him, she said softly, sitting beside him. He loved stories about knights and dragons. Every night I had to tell him one. He'd lie there, eyes wide, asking questions. Did the knight have a fast horse, Papa? Did he save the princess? Did the dragon breathe real fire? Elijah's voice broke slightly. The last story I told him was about a brave knight who protected his kingdom from an evil wizard. He asked if the knight won. I said he always did, because good always defeats evil in the end. You lied to him. I gave him hope. Every parent does. Clara took the wooden gun, examining the careful craftsmanship. You could have other children, someday. Could you? She was quiet for a long moment. My mother lost 3 babies before having me. The doctor said I was a miracle, said she shouldn't try again. She placed the toy back on the shelf carefully. But if God granted one miracle, perhaps he might grant another. You want children in this world we're building. I want children because of the world we're building, a world where they won't have to fear men like Garrett. Elijah turned to look at her, really look at her. In the moonlight through the window, she seemed to glow with fierce purpose. When had she stopped being the wounded girl he'd saved and become this force of nature? Clara, he started, then stopped, unsure how to voice what he was feeling. She seemed to understand anyway. I know, it's too soon. We're still strangers in many ways. But Elijah, I think we could be more. When this is over, when Garrett's gone and the territory is free, I think we could be real. Real. A real marriage, a real family, a real future. She stood, kissing his forehead gently. But first, we have a war to win. As she left, Elijah sat in his dead son's room, surrounded by ghosts and possibilities. Outside, he could hear sentries walking their posts, Pike's men preparing for the next attack, the community they'd built standing guard. They'd started with 2 broken people making a desperate alliance. Now they had an army, a family of choice bound by shared loss and common purpose. The Hartleys with their Boston money and Eastern connections, Sarah with her fierce loyalty and hidden strengths, the Freemans with their steady support, Father Miguel with his unwavering faith, Rosalie with her dangerous knowledge, even Wells with his guilty conscience and inside information, and at the center of it all, Clara, his unexpected wife, his partner, perhaps someday his love. Garrett had created his own doom when he'd ordered Clara's death. He'd united his enemies, given them a leader, a symbol. The ghost sheriff's bride had become more dangerous than the ghost himself. Tomorrow would bring new battles. The governor's visit loomed. Garrett would strike again, harder and meaner. More good people would die. But tonight they had this. A house full of protectors, a cause worth fighting for, and the beginning of something that might outlast the war. The family they'd built from ashes was ready to rise. The drought started 3 weeks after the ambush, as if God himself had decided to test their resolve. The wells ran low, then dry. The grass turned brown and brittle. Cattle began dropping dead in the fields. And with the drought came something worse. Wildfire. Elijah stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, watching smoke pillars rise in 3 different directions. The nearest was only 5 miles away, driven by winds that hadn't stopped howling for days. "It's Garrett," Pike said, riding up beside him. "My scouts confirm it. His men are setting the fires, driving them toward properties of anyone who stood against him. He's burning out the whole territory to get to us. He's desperate. The federal marshals are a week away. Judge Harrison sent word. They're coming with warrants for his arrest. He knows his time's running out." Clara appeared on horseback, her face streaked with soot. She'd been helping evacuate the Chen family whose farm was already consumed. "We've got bigger problems. The fire's heading for the town. If it reaches the ammunition store, the whole town will go up." Elijah finished. "How long?" 6 hours, maybe less, if the wind keeps up." They rode hard back to the homestead, now a refugee camp for dozens of families fleeing the flames. Clara's grandparents were organizing supplies with surprising efficiency, Elizabeth Hartley barking orders like a general, while William managed the logistics of housing and feeding nearly 100 people. "We need to create a fire break," Samuel Freeman was saying to the gathered crowd. "Cut a line the fire can't cross." "That'll take every able body we have," someone protested. "And Garrett's men are still out there." "Then we fight fire and gunmen at the same time," Clara said, dismounting. "We don't have a choice." That's when Wells stumbled into the yard, clothes torn, face bloodied. "Garrett's lost his mind," he gasped. "He's released the prisoners from the territorial prison, offered them pardons if they kill you and Clara. There's 30 of them, led by Jake Thornton." Everyone knew that name. Thornton was a killer who made Garrett look civilized. He'd murdered an entire family, including 3 children, over a land dispute. "How long before they get here?" Elijah asked. "They're maybe 2 hours behind me." Clara climbed onto a wagon, addressing the crowd. "Listen to me. We can run and let everything burn, let Garrett win. Or we can stand and fight, not just for ourselves, but for this entire territory. What's it going to be?" The response was immediate. Men and women grabbed shovels, axes, anything that could dig or cut. Pike organized his mercenaries into a defensive line. Even the children helped carrying water buckets and supplies. They worked through the afternoon heat, cutting a fire break 200 yards wide. The smoke grew thicker, turning the sun into a bloody orange eye. Ash fell like snow, covering everything in gray. That's when the riders appeared on the horizon. Not 30, but closer to 50. Garrett had recruited more men, promising them spoils from the properties of the dead. "Take positions," Pike shouted. But before the first shot could be fired, something unexpected happened. The Apache appeared. 20 warriors, painted for war, rode down from the mountains. Their leader, a man Elijah recognized as Joseph Crow, Feather approached under a white flag. "Morrison," he said in perfect English, "your wife helped my sister when she was sick, gave her medicine when the town doctor refused. We pay our debts." Clara stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Your help is welcome, Joseph." "We don't fight your war," Joseph clarified, "but we'll fight the fire. It threatens our lands, too." It was a strange alliance. Settlers, Apache Chinese workers, Mexican farmers, Boston aristocrats, and hired guns all working together as the world burned around them. The battle, when it came, was chaos. Thornton's men hit them at sunset, just as the fire crowned the ridge. Gunfire mixed with the roar of flames. Men fought hand to hand in smoke so thick you couldn't see 10 feet. Clara found herself separated from the others, trapped between the advancing fire and 3 of Thornton's men. She'd emptied her rifle and was down to Margaret's pistol. 2 shots left. "Well, well," one of them leered. "The ghost sheriff's whore, all alone." She shot him in the chest without hesitation. The second man rushed her, and she put her last bullet through his throat. The third grabbed her, his hands around her neck, squeezing. Then his grip loosened, and he fell forward, a knife in his back. Sarah stood behind him, pale but determined. "Boston ladies," she panted, "also learn knife work." They fought their way back to the main group, finding absolute mayhem. The fire had jumped the fire break in 2 places. The Apache were conducting controlled burns to rob the main fire of fuel. Pike's men were in a shooting match with Thornton's group. And in the middle of it all, Elijah and Jake Thornton were locked in hand-to-hand combat. Thornton was bigger, younger, stronger. He had Elijah on the ground, hands around his throat. Clara grabbed a rifle, but in the smoke and chaos, she couldn't get a clear shot. Then Charlotte Brennan appeared out of nowhere, swinging a shovel like a club. It connected with Thornton's head with a sound like a melon dropping. He toppled sideways, and Elijah rolled away, gasping. "Seemed like you needed help," Charlotte said simply. The tide turned when Father Miguel arrived with reinforcements from town. Shopkeepers, saloon girls, even some of Rosalie's working girls armed with shotguns. The sight of the entire community standing together finally broke Thornton's forces. Those who weren't dead fled into the desert, but the fire still raged. They fought it through the night bucket brigades and backfires, everyone working past exhaustion. Clara's grandmother stood next to Chinese laborers passing buckets. William Hartley worked beside former slaves, digging trenches. At dawn, the miracle came. Rain. Not much, just a drizzle, but enough to slow the fire's advance. By noon, they had it contained. The cost was staggering. 12 dead dozens, injured hundreds of acres burned. But they'd saved the town, saved most of the farms, saved each other. Elijah found Clara sitting on what was left of their porch, the house having survived by mere yards. She was covered in soot and blood, not all of it hers, staring at the devastation. "We won," he said, sitting beside her. "Did we look at what it cost? Look at what we protected. Every person out there fought for something bigger than themselves. Garrett united them in hatred of him, but you united them in hope for something better." She leaned against him, exhausted. "I couldn't have done it without you. Nor I without you." They sat in silence, watching their neighbors begin the cleanup. Then Clara stiffened. "Where's Garrett? No one's seen him since yesterday." The answer came an hour later when Marcus Wells rode in frantic. "He's taken hostages. The judge's family, the banker's children, anyone related to those who stood against him. He's holed up in the courthouse with 50 men demanding safe passage out of the territory and $100,000. "How many hostages?" Elijah asked. 23, including... Wells swallowed hard. "Including your friend Mary Freeman. She was in town getting medical supplies." Samuel Freeman's face went white. "Mary." Clara stood swaying slightly from exhaustion. "We're ending this. Today." "It's a fortress," Pike warned. "The courthouse was built to withstand Apache raids. We'd lose half our people trying to storm it." "Then we don't storm it," Clara said. "We make him come out." She outlined a plan that was either brilliant or insane. Using Charlotte's information about the hidden ledger in Garrett's office, they'd send in someone he wouldn't suspect to retrieve it. Without that ledger, Garrett had no leverage over his criminal network. They'd turn on him to save themselves. Who could get in without suspicion, Elijah asked. "Me," Elizabeth Hartley said, stepping forward, a frightened old woman seeking to negotiate her granddaughter's surrender in exchange for the hostages. He'd believe that. "Grandmother, no. Clara, I failed my daughter. I won't fail you." Besides, Elizabeth smiled grimly. "Boston ladies know how to open safes. My father was a banker who taught me to always have contingency plans. The plan required precise timing. Elizabeth would enter with a surrender offer locate and crack the safe while negotiating. Pike's men would create a distraction at the rear of the building. Joseph's Apache warriors would position themselves on the rooftops, and Elijah and Clara would lead the main assault once Garrett's attention was divided. "It's suicide," Samuel protested. "It's justice," Clara corrected. "And it's time." They moved at dusk. Elizabeth walked into the courthouse alone, dressed in her finest Boston clothes, looking every inch the terrified grandmother. Clara watched from across the street, Margaret's rifle ready. The waiting was agony. 10 minutes. 20. Then they heard it. Elizabeth's voice, loud and clear. "Mr. Garrett, you're a businessman. Surely we can come to an arrangement." The signal. She was in his office. Pike's men detonated their charges at the rear wall. Not enough to breach, but enough to draw attention. Garrett's men rushed to defend what they thought was an attack. That's when the Apache struck from above, dropping through skylights like deadly shadows. The confusion was immediate and total. Elijah led the charge through the front, Clara beside him, both guns blazing. The courthouse became a battlefield, smoke and gunfire, shouts and screams. Clara fought her way toward Garrett's office, finding her grandmother calmly working on the safe, while chaos erupted around her. "Almost got it, dear," Elizabeth said, as if they were having tea. The safe clicked open. Inside was the ledger, along with cash and bonds worth a fortune. Elizabeth grabbed it all, stuffing it into her handbag. That's when Garrett appeared in the doorway, gun drawn. "You clever bitch." He aimed at Clara, but Elizabeth moved faster than seemed possible for a woman her age, throwing herself between them. The bullet took her in the chest. "Grandmother," Clara caught her as she fell. "Did I mention?" Elizabeth gasped. "Boston ladies also know how to take a bullet." She pressed the ledger into Clara's hands. "Finish it." Garrett advanced, gun raised, but Elijah appeared behind him. The fight was brutal. Both men passed words past anything but the need to end this. They crashed through the office window, falling into the street. Clara ran out, finding them rolling in the dirt, each trying to gain advantage. The entire battle seemed to pause, everyone watching the ghost sheriff and the corrupt deputy mayor in their final confrontation. Garrett got his gun up, first pointed at Elijah's head. "Should have stayed dead, Morrison." The shot echoed off the buildings, but it was Garrett who fell a hole between his eyes. Clara stood behind him, smoking rifle in her hands. "That's Mrs. Morrison to you." The silence that followed was deafening. Then someone started clapping, then another. Soon the entire street erupted in celebration, but Clara didn't celebrate. She ran back to her grandmother, who lay in Mary Freeman's arms. Mary had been freed when the Apache took the second floor, and her medical skills were the only thing keeping Elizabeth alive. "Grandmother, hold on, please." Elizabeth smiled weakly. "I got to be useful. Your mother would be proud." "Don't leave me. I just found you again." "You found yourself, child. That's more important." Elizabeth's eyes flickered to Elijah. "Take care of her." "With my life," he promised. Elizabeth Hartley died as the sun set, surrounded by the unlikely family her granddaughter had built. William held his wife's hand, tears streaming down his weathered face. They buried her the next morning alongside the others who'd fallen. Father Miguel spoke of courage transcending age and class. Joseph's warriors sang a death song. The entire territory, it seemed, came to pay respects. At the grave, Clara spoke her voice, carrying across the crowd. "My grandmother came here, thinking she'd save me from a primitive life. Instead, she discovered what I'd already learned, that civilization isn't about where you live or what you wear. It's about standing for what's right, protecting those who can't protect themselves, and facing evil even when you're afraid." Elizabeth Hartley died a warrior. She died free. The federal marshals arrived 2 days later, finding Garrett dead and his network destroyed. The ledger Elizabeth had died retrieving revealed corruption reaching to the territorial capital. Dozens were arrested. Judge Harrison was appointed interim territorial governor, and he had an announcement. "Elijah Morrison," he said publicly, "you never stopped being sheriff. Garrett's appointment of Hutchins was illegal. You're hereby reinstated with full back pay." "I appreciate that, Judge," Elijah replied, "but I'll only accept on one condition. My deputy is Clara Morrison." The crowd murmured. A female deputy was unheard of. "The law doesn't prohibit it," Clara said, stepping forward, "and I've proven I can do the job." Judge Harrison looked at the crowd, saw their nods of support. "Then so be it. Sheriff and Deputy Morrison, God help any criminal who crosses you too." That night, in their rebuilt home, Elijah and Clara finally had a moment alone. They stood in what had been Thomas's room, now converted to a study, where Clara kept all the testimonies and evidence they'd gathered. Your grandmother was remarkable, Elijah said. She was. She spent her whole life being proper-fitting expectations. But when it mattered, she became who she really was, a fighter. Like her granddaughter, Clara turned to him. We did it. We actually did it. We survived it. There's a difference. Is there? Look outside Elijah. He did. The yard was full of people rebuilding, replanting, moving forward. Samuel and Mary Freeman directing construction, Sarah teaching children their letters, Pike's remaining men helping raise a new barn, Apache and settlers working side by side. We didn't just survive, Clara said. We transformed this place, these people, ourselves. She was right. The territory that had been under Garrett's shadow was free. The people who'd been isolated were united, and two broken souls had found something neither had expected. Clara. Elijah began, then stopped. How did you tell someone that their forced marriage of convenience had become the most important thing in your life? She seemed to understand. She always did. I know, she said softly. Me too. They kissed then, their first real kiss, not born of desperation or gratitude, but of genuine feeling. When they pulled apart, both were crying. Your grandmother was wrong about one thing, Elijah said. What's that? She said I should take care of you, but you've taken care of me just as much. Clara smiled through her tears. That's what partners do. Outside, thunder rumbled. Real rain was coming enough to heal the burned land. The drought was ending, and with it, the old world Garrett had built. A new world was beginning, one where former enemies could become allies, where women could be deputies, where love could grow from the ashes of tragedy. The great crisis had passed, but its resolution had changed everything. And in the sheriff's house at the edge of town, two people who'd started as strangers held each other and planned for a future neither had dared imagine just 2 months before. The ghost sheriff and his bride had become something more. They'd become hope itself. 6 months after Garrett's death, the territory had transformed beyond recognition. The Morrison homestead had grown into a small compound with new buildings housing the sheriff's office, a school where Sarah taught, and a medical clinic run by a young doctor from Philadelphia who had heard about their community and came to help. Clara stood in the cemetery placing fresh wildflowers on her grandmother's grave. The stone read, Elizabeth Hartley, Boston Lady Western Warrior. Beside it, new markers for Margaret and Thomas Morrison had been properly erected, their bodies finally laid to rest with honor after being exhumed from the pauper's field where Garrett had dumped them. The federal investigators finished their report, Elijah said, approaching quietly. Garrett's network went deeper than we thought. They've arrested 2 territorial senators and a federal judge. Good. Clara touched her grandmother's headstone gently. She didn't die for nothing. None of them did. William Hartley had stayed after his wife's death, surprising everyone. The refined Boston gentleman had thrown himself into rebuilding the territory's infrastructure, using his banking connections to bring legitimate investment. He had also legally adopted Sarah, giving her the family she'd never had. Your grandfather wants to build a hospital, Elijah continued, in Elizabeth's name. She'd pretend to hate the fuss, but secretly be pleased. Clara turned to face her husband. There's something I need to tell you. The way she said it made Elijah's heart skip. Are you hurt sick? No, I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Elijah's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, joy, fear, and finally wonder. You're sure? The doctor confirmed it this morning. About 3 months along. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy? Happy. He pulled back to look at her. Clara, I thought I'd never be a father again. I thought that part of my life was over. And now I'm terrified and thrilled in equal measure. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. Our child. Growing in a world we helped make safer, Clara added, though there's still work to do. There was. The territorial legislature was meeting next month to vote on women's suffrage, a motion Clara had been pushing. The Apache were negotiating for protected lands with Joseph Crow Feather as their representative. The Chinese workers were forming a union with Samuel Freeman's support. Change was happening, but it came with resistance. There were still those who longed for the old ways, who resented the alliance Clara and Elijah had built. That evening, they held their regular community meeting in the barn. Nearly 200 people attended now from all walks of life. Clara stood to address them, her natural authority evident. "We've received word from the capital," she announced. "They're sending a new territorial governor. Harrison's interim appointment is ending." Murmurs of concern rippled through the crowd. Judge Harrison had been supportive of their reforms. "Who are they sending?" Rosalie asked. The former madam had transformed her brothel into a boarding house for women escaping violent situations. "Theodore Morton, Jr.," Clara said, and the room went silent. "Your brother," Sarah gasped. "But you said you didn't have—" "Half-brother," Clara corrected. "From my father's first marriage. I've never met him. Father never spoke of him." "Why?" Elijah asked. They had a falling out 20 years ago. Teddy wanted Father to join him in railroad speculation. Father refused, choosing public service instead. They never reconciled. Marcus Wells, who'd become their chronicler of sorts, documenting everything for future generations, spoke up. "I remember him visiting once. Cold man, nothing like your father." "Well, he'll be here in a week," Clara said, "and we need to decide how to handle it." The meeting went late. Strategies discussed, concerns aired, but Clara seemed distracted, her hand often drifting to her stomach. Only Elijah and Sarah knew about the pregnancy, and Clara wanted to keep it quiet until she was further along. That night, as they prepared for bed, Elijah noticed Clara reading her father's letters again. "Looking for something. Clues about Teddy. Father must have had reasons for never mentioning him to me. Maybe he was protecting you. Or maybe he was ashamed. Family shame runs deep in the Mortons, apparently." Elijah sat beside her, taking her hand. "You're not your father or your brother. You're Clara Morrison, the woman who brought down an empire of corruption. And now I might have to do it again if Teddy proves problematic. Then we do it together, like always." She leaned against him, drawing comfort from his presence. Their relationship had deepened over the months, convenience becoming affection, becoming something deeper. They hadn't said the words yet, but both felt it. Theodore Morton, Jr. arrived with an entourage that screamed wealth and power. His private railroad car was luxurious beyond anything the territory had seen. He was tall, silver-haired, with their father's sharp features, but none of his warmth. He summoned Clara to the governor's mansion immediately. "I'll go with you," Elijah said. "No, this is family business. I need to face him alone first." The mansion felt cold despite the warm day. Teddy received her in the formal parlor, not rising when she entered. "So," he said, examining her like a specimen. "My father's bastard daughter." Clara's spine stiffened. "Legitimate daughter. My parents were married. After I was disowned for refusing to enter politics, he replaced me with you. He never mentioned you." "Of course not. I was the disappointment. The son who chose money over public service." Teddy poured himself brandy, not offering her any. "And now you've married a disgraced sheriff and style yourself some sort of frontier hero." "Elijah was never disgraced. He was framed." "Semantics." Teddy waved dismissively. "I'm here to restore order. This territory is becoming too progressive. Women thinking they can be deputies. Savages thinking they deserve land rights. Chinese thinking they're equal to whites. It's chaos. It's justice. It's bad for business. Do you know how much money this territory loses by not properly exploiting its resources? The Apache sit on mineral-rich lands. The Chinese could be paid half what white workers make. Women in the workforce drive down wages. Clara stood. You're everything Father fought against. Father was a naive idealist who died poor. I'm worth $10 million. And what's your soul worth? Teddy's face darkened. You're very much like him. That's not a compliment. I'm ordering you and your husband to resign as sheriff and deputy. You have a week to comply. We were legally appointed. Laws change. I have the legislature's support, bought and paid for just like everything else. Clara left the mansion shaking with rage. She found Elijah waiting with horses. That bad? Worse. He's Garrett with better manners and legal authority. They called an emergency meeting that night. When Clara explained Teddy's plans, the crowd erupted in anger. We just got rid of one tyrant, someone shouted. We fight, Pike said. His mercenaries had stayed becoming permanent residents. We've done it before. This is different, Clara warned. He has legal authority, federal backing, money. Then we fight smarter, Sarah suggested. Clara, does he know about the pregnancy? Clara's hand went to her stomach instinctively. No, and I want to keep it that way. But William Hartley had an idea. A pregnant woman being forced from her job by a cruel relative, the Eastern newspapers would devour that story. I have connections. You want to use my pregnancy as a weapon. I want to use everything we have. Your brother thinks money is power, but public opinion is stronger. Over the next week, they orchestrated a campaign that would have made Clara's father proud. Letters flooded Eastern newspapers about the brave female deputy who'd brought down a corruption ring, now being persecuted by her wealthy brother. Photographs of Clara teaching Apache children to read, helping Chinese families register to vote, protecting women at Rosalie's shelter. The story caught fire. Frontier justice versus railroad greed. Sister against brother in battle for territory's soul. The headlines were sensational but effective. Teddy summoned Clara again, this time his rage barely contained. You've made me a villain in the press. You did that yourself. I could destroy you. A word from me and federal troops would arrest your husband for the murders he was originally accused of. Try it, Clara said calmly. We have signed testimonies from 30 witnesses proving his innocence, including a confession from one of Garrett's men who actually committed the murders. He's dying of consumption, wanted to clear his conscience. You think you've won. I think you have a choice. Work with us to build a better territory, or fight us and lose, because we won't stop. We've faced worse than you and survived. That's when her strength suddenly wavered. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen and she gasped, doubling over. Clara, Teddy actually looked concerned. Get Elijah, she managed. Something's wrong. The next hours were a blur of pain and fear. The doctor worked frantically while Elijah held Clara's hand, whispering prayers he hadn't said since Thomas died. The baby's coming too early, the doctor said grimly. 4 months premature. I don't think... Save them both, Elijah commanded. Whatever it takes. Clara's labor lasted 18 hours. The entire town held vigil outside the clinic. Apache medicine men chanted. Father Miguel led prayers. Even Teddy waited pacing the porch. Finally, a cry. Weak, but real. The baby was tiny fitting in Elijah's palm. A girl, alive but fragile. She needs an incubator, the doctor said. The nearest one is in San Francisco. Then we get her there, William said immediately. I'll pay for a special train. I'll go, Teddy said suddenly. Everyone stared at him. My railroad car is equipped for medical emergencies. It's the fastest way. Clara, exhausted and pale, looked at her brother. Why? Because. Teddy struggled with words. Because Father would have. For family. The journey to San Francisco took 2 days. Teddy's private car was transformed into a mobile medical unit. Clara, despite her weakness, refused to leave the baby's side. Elijah stayed with them while Sarah and the doctor provided constant care. During those long hours rolling through desert and mountain, something shifted between the siblings. Teddy told stories of their father as a young man, idealistic and fierce. Clara shared memories of him as an older father, tired but still fighting. He talked about you sometimes, Clara admitted, when he was dying. Said his greatest regret was losing his son to pride. His or mine. Both, I think. The baby survived the journey. The San Francisco doctors were amazed at her tenacity. She's a fighter, one said. Like her mother, I'd guess. Like all the Morrison women, Elijah said, including Sarah in his glance. They stayed in San Francisco for a month while the baby grew stronger. Teddy remained with them, using his influence to get the best medical care. Slowly, the cold businessman began to thaw. I've spent 20 years hating our father, he told Clara one evening. But watching you seeing what you've built, I understand him better. It was never about choosing poverty over wealth. It was about choosing purpose over profit. It doesn't have to be either or, Clara suggested. You could use your wealth for good. Like your grandmother did. She'd have liked you, I think. You have her strategic mind. When they finally returned to the territory, the baby strong enough to travel, they found transformation waiting. The legislature, pressured by public opinion and Teddy's surprising change of heart, had passed women's suffrage. The Apache Treaty had been signed. The Chinese Workers' Union was recognized. At the homestead, now truly home, they held a celebration that brought together every faction of their coalition. Clara stood before them, her daughter in her arms, Elijah beside her. We've named her Elizabeth Margaret Morrison, she announced, for the grandmothers she'll never meet, but whose strength runs in her veins. Teddy stepped forward. I've been wrong about many things, but I'm hoping to be right about this. I'm resigning as governor, recommending Judge Harrison be permanently appointed. And I'm using my fortune to build the Elizabeth Hartley Hospital and the Theodore Morton Sr. School for all children, regardless of race or gender. The crowd erupted in celebration. Music started, a mixture of Apache drums, Chinese strings, Mexican guitars, and Eastern piano that William had imported. Dancing followed cultures blending in joy. Late that night, Elijah and Clara stood on their porch, little Elizabeth sleeping in Clara's arms. The territory spread before them, peaceful, under starlight. We did it, Clara said softly. You did it. I just tried to keep up. We did it together. That's what matters. Elijah wrapped his arms around both his girls. I love you, both of you. I should have said it months ago, but I love you too. Clara interrupted. Not because you saved me. Not because we were forced together, but because you saw me as a partner, not a project. You let me be strong. You were always strong. I just had the privilege of witnessing it. They stood together, a family forged from tragedy, but defined by triumph. Inside the house, Sarah was putting the other children to bed, orphans they'd taken in. William was reading by the fire. The Freemans were staying the night, as they often did. Pike and his men had built homes nearby, permanent guardians of the peace they'd fought to create. Your father would be proud, Elijah said. So would Margaret and Thomas. And my mother, and your grandmother. All our ghosts finally at rest. No, Clara corrected. Not ghosts anymore. Guardian angels watching over what we've built. A coyote howled in the distance, but it didn't sound lonely anymore. It sounded like the territory itself, wild and free, calling out in celebration of its rebirth. The ghost sheriff and his bride had become something neither had imagined when they'd first met in blood and desperation. They'd become the heart of a new world, one where justice wasn't just an ideal, but a daily practice, where family wasn't just blood, but choice, where love could grow from the rockiest soil. Little Elizabeth stirred in her sleep, and Clara kissed her tiny forehead. You'll grow up free, she whispered. Free to be anything you choose. Sheriff, perhaps, Elijah suggested with a smile. Or governor, or doctor, or teacher, or all of them. Clara looked up at her husband. We've given her and all the children here that freedom. We've given ourselves that freedom too. And in that moment, under the vast western sky, with their chosen family around them and their daughter in their arms, Elijah and Clara Morrison were no longer broken people trying to survive. They were whole. They were home. They were the future the territory had been waiting for. 5 years had passed since the night Elijah found Clara bleeding in the desert. The autumn of 1879 painted the territory in gold and rust, and the Morrison homestead bustled with preparation for the harvest festival that had become an annual tradition. Elizabeth Margaret Morrison, now 4 years old, raced through the yard chasing her younger brother Theodore, age 2. Their laughter mixed with the sounds of preparation, tables being set, lanterns being hung, food being prepared by dozens of hands working in harmony. "Careful, little ones," Sarah called out, now Sarah Hartley, legally having married William 2 years prior, in a ceremony that surprised everyone, including themselves. "Your mother will have my hide if you tear those new clothes before the ceremony." Clara stood on the porch 7 months pregnant with their third child, watching the controlled chaos with satisfaction. Her deputy badge caught the afternoon light, the same badge she'd worn while pregnant with both Elizabeth and Theodore, refusing to let anything slow her down until the final weeks. "You should be resting," Elijah said, approaching with a gentle scold in his voice. "I'll rest when I'm dead. Today's too important." Today was indeed important. The 5th anniversary of what people now called the Liberation, the day Garrett died and the territory began its transformation. But more than that, it was the day they'd chosen to hold the first integrated wedding in the territory's history. Joseph Crow Feather's daughter marrying Samuel Freeman's nephew, a union that would have been illegal just years before. The governors arrived, Pike announced, approaching with his wife Maria, whom he'd met and married 3 years ago when she came to teach at the school. Governor Harrison, permanently appointed after Teddy's resignation, had become one of their strongest allies. He arrived not with pomp, but with humility, having learned that real power in the territory came from the people's respect, not government decree. Sheriff Morrison, Deputy Morrison, he greeted formally, then smiled. "Elijah, Clara, how are you feeling?" "Like I'm carrying a wild horse," Clara replied, rubbing her belly. "This one's a fighter." "Like the mother," Harrison observed. "I have news from Washington. They've approved the statehood petition. We'll be voting next year." "A state," Elijah mused. "When I first came here 20 years ago, this was barely a territory." "You've built something remarkable," Harrison said, looking around at the gathering crowd. Apache, Mexican, Chinese, black, white, all mingling freely. This should be a model for the entire nation. Theodore Morton Jr. arrived in a much more modest carriage than his first visit. He'd kept his promise, using his wealth for the territory's benefit. The Morton Railroad Corporation will be extending a line through the territory, he said, causing murmurs of concern. Railroads usually meant exploitation. However, this will be different. The railroad will be owned jointly by the corporation and the territorial residents. Profits will be shared. Jobs will go to locals first with equal pay, regardless of race or gender. The crowd erupted in amazement. It was unprecedented. Additionally, Teddy continued, "I'm establishing the Clara Morrison Foundation for Women's Rights, funded in perpetuity, to ensure my sister's work continues long after we're all gone." Clara stood, tears in her eyes, and embraced her brother. The crowd applauded, understanding they were witnessing history. As the celebration continued into the night, Elijah found himself standing where Margaret and Thomas were buried, now part of a garden Sarah maintained. Clara joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you think they know?" she asked. "How much good came from their sacrifice?" "I think they do. Sometimes I feel them, especially when Elizabeth laughs. She has Thomas's laugh. And Margaret's eyes. That same fierce kindness. Father Miguel approached older now, but still spry. I've been thinking about that night I married you to. How desperate it seemed, how impossible. Yet here we are. God works in mysterious ways, Clara suggested. God works through brave people willing to stand against evil, Miguel corrected. You two were his instruments. The music drew them back to the celebration. Clara danced with her children, then with William, then with Teddy. Elijah partnered with Sarah, then Mary, then even Rosalie, who at 60 had become the territory's most effective advocate for women's safety. You know what I love most about our life? Clara asked Elijah as they finally danced together, her belly making it challenging, but neither caring. What's that? We didn't just survive our trauma. We transformed it into purpose. Every person here has a similar story. Loss, pain, fear. But together, we turned it into this. She gestured at the celebration around them. The preacher who married Margaret and me said something I never forgot. Elijah replied. He said marriage wasn't about finding someone to live with, but finding someone you couldn't live without. And I couldn't live without you, Clara Morrison, not because you saved me from being a ghost, but because you showed me that resurrection was possible, that love could grow from the ashes of loss. You gave me the same gift, Clara said softly. When Papa died, I thought my purpose died with him. But you helped me find my own purpose, my own strength. Little Elizabeth ran up tugging on Elijah's coat. Papa Theo won't share the cake. A crisis indeed, Elijah said seriously, scooping her up. We must investigate immediately. As they walked toward the dessert table, Clara felt the baby kick strongly. She paused, hand on her belly, smiling at the life within. This child would be born into a world so different from the one she'd known, a world where women could vote and hold office, where Apache children learned alongside white children, where Chinese families owned businesses and property, where love could cross any boundary. Marcus Wells, now the territory's official historian, was documenting everything with his new camera, one of the first in the region. Stand together, he called to the Morrison family. Let me capture this moment. They stood before their home, Elijah, Clara, their children, Sarah and William the Freemans Pike, and Maria, Father Miguel, Rosalie, Joseph Crow, Feather and his family, the Chens, and dozens of others who'd become family through choice and struggle. The flash powder exploded, capturing a moment in time. But what it couldn't capture was the full story, the blood and tears that had watered this ground, the courage that had built these bonds, the love that had grown from loss. As the evening wound down, Clara stood to address the crowd one final time. 5 years ago, my husband found me dying in the desert. We were both broken, both lost, both convinced our lives were over. But we found each other, and then we found all of you. Together, we proved that tyranny could be defeated, that justice could prevail, that love could conquer hate. She paused, looking at each face in the crowd. But more than that, we proved that family isn't just blood. It's choice. It's standing together when standing alone would be easier. It's fighting for each other's children as fiercely as our own. It's building a world where no one has to face their demons alone. Some say the West is about conquest, she continued, but we've shown it's about community. Some say strength is about power over others. We've proven it's about lifting others up. Some say the past determines the future. We've demonstrated that people can change, can grow, can become more than their worst moments or their deepest losses. Old Joseph stood raising his cup. To the ghosts who became warriors. To the warriors who became family, Sarah added. To the family that became hope, William called out. The toasts continued, each one adding another layer to their shared story. As the last guest departed and the children were put to bed, Elijah and Clara sat on their porch, the same porch where they'd faced down Garrett years before. What do you think our legacy will be? Clara asked. This, Elijah said, simply gesturing at the peaceful night, the prosperous homestead, the community they'd built. We proved that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they stand together. We prove that love is stronger than hate, that courage is contagious, that justice delayed isn't always justice denied. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd started as strangers united by tragedy, now partners in every sense. The stars above seemed brighter than that first night, or perhaps it was just that the darkness no longer seemed so threatening. "I love you, Elijah Morrison," Clara said, leaning against his shoulder. "And I love you, Clara Morrison. Thank you for saving me." We saved each other. We saved everyone. As they headed inside, Clara paused at the mantel where Margaret's journal and photograph still held places of honor. She touched them gently, a gesture of respect and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to the ghosts, who'd become guardian angels. "For everything." A warm breeze stirred through the house, rustling papers, making the lanterns flicker. It felt like an answer, like a blessing, like a promise that love never truly dies. It just transforms, spreads, and grows in ways we never expect. The ghost sheriff and his bride had become legend, but more importantly, they'd become proof that even in the hardest ground, with enough courage and care, hope could take root and bloom into something beautiful. Their story would be told for generations, not as a tale of revenge or violence, but as testament to the power of choosing love over fear, community over isolation, and hope over despair. And in the Morrison homestead, as Claire felt new life stirring within her, and Elijah held their children close, the future stretched bright and full of promise. A future they'd fought for, bled for, and won together. The end. Where there had once been only ghosts and sorrow, now there was laughter and life. Where hatred had ruled, love had conquered. And in the great expanse of the American West, one small corner had become a beacon of what was possible when people chose to rise from their ashes and build something better together.